What if you could hold a piece of the past in your hands, not just a broken relic, but something that once pulsed with purpose, skill, and human effort? Imagine a rusted, forgotten tool lying silent for centuries, waiting to whisper its story. These discarded objects are far more than artifacts gathering dust in a museum case. They are keys, literal keys to unlocking entire professions, entire ways of life that shaped ancient civilizations and then vanished from memory. Today, we're going on a journey to explore 24 such tools. Each one opens a door to a lost trade, a forgotten skill, a craft that once thrived across the globe, from the sun-baked markets of Egypt to the misty highlands of the Andes. Picture the hands that held them: the Roman surgeon performing a delicate operation with a bronze scalpel, the Egyptian perfumer blending sacred fragrances, the Mesopotamian scribe pressing symbols into wet clay. These tools tell stories of breathtaking innovation, profound artistry, and raw human ingenuity. They show us how daily life was built, how cultures connected through trade and technology, and how expertise was passed down through generations. We're about to uncover hidden histories etched into metal, stone, and bone, because every tool has a tale, every profession leaves a legacy, and together we're going to rediscover them, one astonishing artifact at a time. Now picture this instrument not as a museum piece behind glass, but as it was 2,000 years ago, gripped firmly in the hand of a Roman surgeon or chirurgus in a room lit by oil lamps. This was not a general practitioner. This was a highly trained specialist, a master of their craft who navigated the human body with a confidence that still astonishes historians today. Their toolkit was a testament to this specialization. Beyond the scalpel itself, archaeological finds, particularly from sites like Pompeii where time stood still, reveal an array of interchangeable blades and probes. Each had a specific purpose, from the sharp, pointed spatulum for exploration to the blunt, flat spathamel for mixing and applying medicines. This level of customization indicates a sophisticated understanding that different procedures demanded different instruments, a principle that is absolutely fundamental to modern surgery. But perhaps even more impressive is what these tools suggest about ancient concepts of hygiene. While the germ theory of disease was millennia away, Roman medical practitioners empirically understood that cleaning their instruments was crucial. They would sterilize them in boiling water or heat them in fires, and many scalpels were designed with smooth, non-porous bronze handles and blades that could be meticulously polished, reducing the places for contaminants to hide. This pragmatic approach to preventing infection saved countless lives and stands as a powerful example of effective innovation born from observation and experience. Consider the sheer breadth of procedures these skilled hands performed. With this seemingly simple bronze blade, a chirurgus could drain a painful abscess, carefully incise a tumor, or even perform a cataract couching, an incredibly delicate operation to restore sight by displacing a clouded lens. The design of the scalpel was paramount for such precise work. The balance of the handle, the angle of the blade, and the sharpness of its edge were all carefully considered to allow for control that minimized collateral damage to surrounding tissue. This was not crude butchering, it was calculated, refined craftsmanship applied to the human form. We find the most compelling evidence for the importance of this profession not in the cities, but on the frontiers of the empire. Complete surgical kits discovered buried with military medics at Roman fortresses tell a story of necessity and valor. These army surgeons followed the legions into battle, tasked with the grim duty of extracting arrows, amputating shattered limbs, and closing wounds under the most trying conditions imaginable. Their work was the difference between a return to duty or a grave, and their tools were their most vital allies. It forces us to reconsider our assumptions about the ancient world. How did they achieve such medical sophistication without the benefits of microscopic imaging or synthetic anesthesia? Their success was built upon a foundation of meticulous observation, hands-on experimentation, and a courageous willingness to intervene directly in the processes of life and death. The legacy of the Roman chirurgus is not just a collection of bronze artifacts. It is an enduring testament to the timeless human pursuit of healing, a profession built as much on unwavering courage as it was on skill. Now, shift your focus from the sterile precision of the Roman surgery to the intoxicating, aromatic air of an ancient Egyptian workshop. Here, our next artifact awaits, an exquisitely carved alabaster flask, cool and smooth to the touch. This was the vessel of the Neferu, the master perfume blenders, and it held far more than just scented oil. It contained the very essence of life, death, and divinity in ancient Egypt. To understand this flask is to understand that fragrance was never merely a luxury. It was a fundamental thread woven into the fabric of their existence, connecting the earthly realm to the divine. The Neferu were more than simple artisans. They were revered alchemists, part chemist and part priest, who possessed a profound, secret knowledge of both botany and sacred ritual. Their workshops were laboratories of scent, filled with an array of specialized tools that would look familiar in any modern essential oil distillery. Heavy stone mortars and pestles were used to crush precious resins like frankincense and myrrh, releasing their rich, complex aromas. Elaborate heating vessels allowed for the careful, slow warming of oils to infuse them with these botanical essences, while finely woven strainers, often made from linen or reeds, were crucial for clarifying the final product, ensuring it was as pure and luminous as the gods it was meant to honor. The true scale of their craft is revealed not in the workshop itself, but on the map of the ancient world. The ingredients that filled these alabaster flasks tell a story of breathtaking international commerce. Cinnamon and sandalwood likely journeyed from distant India. The prized terebinth resin, a key ingredient in the famous Quipu incense, was imported from the Levant, and the most legendary expeditions of all were sent to the fabled land of Punt, a place believed to be near modern-day Somalia or Eritrea. Egyptian reliefs proudly depict these great trading ships returning from Punt, their holds overflowing with heaps of fragrant myrrh resin, living myrrh trees to be replanted in Egypt, and ebony and ivory. This means the Neferu were not just local craftspeople, they were central figures in a global supply chain, their creations dependent on the success of royal-sponsored voyages across treacherous seas. The perfumer's flask, therefore, becomes a symbol of Egypt's economic power and its vast network of diplomatic and trade relationships, each drop of perfume representing a monumental effort of exploration and exchange. Perhaps the most powerful testament to the importance of this profession comes from the silence of the tomb. When the burial chamber of Tutankhamun was unsealed, among the glittering gold and magnificent artifacts were over 50 alabaster jars and flasks, many still containing the residues of their original sacred contents. This was not an exception but a rule. Egyptians believed that the senses persisted in the afterlife, and a noble needed to be equipped with the finest fragrances for eternity. Specific scents were dedicated to specific deities. The scent of lotus was associated with rebirth and was often used in rituals for the god Nefertum, who was himself the god of perfume and the first sunrise. But the use of scent extended far beyond the tomb. Medical papyri detail how certain fragrant oils and salves were used to treat ailments, from headaches to skin conditions, showing a deep understanding of aromatherapy and the antibacterial properties of many resins. The Neferu's creations anointed the bodies of the living, purified the air in temples during ceremonies, and prepared the dead for their journey to the afterlife. This single profession, symbolized by this delicate flask, seamlessly wove together commerce, medicine, daily hygiene, and the most profound spiritual beliefs into a single, fragrant strand. It makes us wonder what other secrets of botanical science and holistic well-being were known to these ancient masters, knowledge that has evaporated into the air like a precious, lost scent. But from the sacred stillness of the Egyptian tomb, we are abruptly called away by a far more raucous and lively sound, the piercing, reedy, and utterly captivating cry of the Greek aulos. And to understand this instrument that could whip a crowd into a frenzy or lead them in solemn prayer, we must first examine the seemingly humble tool that made its music possible, the reed cutter. This was no crude blade. It was a precision instrument of bronze, slender and perfectly weighted, belonging to a master craftsman whose work was as much about physics as it was about art. The aulos-maker was a specialist in every sense of the word, a luthier of the wind whose workshop was a fusion of a musician's ear, an engineer's mind, and a botanist's patience. His primary challenge was the heart of the instrument itself, the reed. Sourced from specific wetlands, the reed had to be cut at exactly the right stage of growth, then carefully shaped and hollowed with this bronze cutter to create the vibrating tongue that would generate the aulos' distinctive voice. A cut that was a fraction too deep or too shallow would render the reed useless, making this tool an extension of the maker's calibrated skill. It was a process that demanded an intimate understanding of natural materials and how they could be transformed to serve a higher purpose of artistic expression. The importance of this craft is echoed across countless pieces of Greek pottery, where we see the aulos taking center stage in the most vibrant aspects of ancient life. At a symposium, the drinking party that was a cornerstone of Greek social and intellectual culture, the haunting melodies of the aulos would provide the soundtrack for poetry, debate, and revelry. In the vast open-air theater, its driving rhythm and haunting tones accompanied the tragedies of Aeschylus and Sophocles, amplifying the emotional despair of the heroes and the ominous warnings of the chorus. It was even central to religious worship, particularly in the ecstatic rites of Dionysus, where its hypnotic music was believed to induce a state of divine possession. This widespread use meant the aulos-maker was not producing a one-size-fits-all instrument. He worked in close consultation with the musicians, tailoring each aulos to its intended setting. A set for the theater might be designed for pure, carrying power to reach the back rows, while one for a symposium might be crafted for a softer, more complex tone to accompany intimate recitation. The musician's personal embouchure, the strength of their breath, and even the specific musical modes they preferred would all be considered in the final design, making each instrument a unique collaboration between artist and artisan. The construction of the aulos itself was a marvel of ancient acoustics. The maker's expertise extended far beyond the reed to the entire assembly. The pipes, often made of carefully seasoned wood like boxwood or maple, or even ivory for the most luxurious models, were meticulously bored to precise lengths and diameters. The bore's internal shape was crucial as it directly influenced the timbre and intonation of the note. Along the body of the pipes, a series of finger holes were painstakingly drilled and then refined, their placement determined by complex acoustic calculations to achieve the correct musical intervals of the Greek scales. Some advanced models even featured metal sleeves or rings that could be rotated to open or close additional holes, acting as an early form of keywork to extend the instrument's range and versatility. This intricate combination of organic and manufactured materials, the natural reed, the carved wood, and the fitted metal components showcases a sophisticated grasp of sound production that rivals modern instrument making. The aulos maker didn't just build an object, he engineered a vessel for emotion and ceremony, a device capable of channeling human breath into something that could stir the soul of an entire city. The legacy of this forgotten profession resonates every time a modern oboist or bassoonist prepares their own carefully shaped reed, continuing a tradition of acoustic artistry that began millennia ago with a simple, perfect blade of bronze. Yet this triangular reed stylus represents something far greater than a simple writing implement. It was the very instrument that gave birth to history itself. In the hands of the Mesopotamian scribe or dubsar, this humble tool became a conduit for human thought, allowing laws, contracts, poetry, and royal decrees to escape the fragility of memory and achieve a form of permanence. These scribes were the original knowledge workers, the administrators of civilization, and their training was famously rigorous. From a young age, students were enrolled in schools known as adubas, which translates literally to tablet houses. Here, they embarked on a long and often harsh curriculum, mastering the hundreds of wedge-shaped signs that constituted cuneiform across multiple languages like Sumerian and Akkadian. Their days were filled with repetitive copying exercises, memorizing complex word lists, and composing their own texts, all under the watchful eye of a strict schoolmaster. Discipline was severe, with records from the time detailing punishments for sloppy work or tardiness. This demanding education was a gateway to a life of immense prestige and opportunity, placing these literate individuals at the very heart of the world's first bureaucratic empires. The evolution of the stylus itself is a fascinating story of technological refinement driven by the needs of its users. The earliest styluses were likely simple reeds with a rounded end, creating cumbersome pictographic impressions. But over centuries, scribes discovered that by cutting the tip of the reed into a sharp, triangular wedge, they could create crisp, clear marks with far greater efficiency. This single innovation revolutionized writing. Instead of laboriously drawing curves, the scribe could now quickly press the stylus into the soft clay at different angles to form a series of consistent, wedge-like combinations. This shift from a drawing technique to an impression technique dramatically increased writing speed and clarity, enabling scribes to keep pace with the growing administrative demands of cities like Uruk, and Babylon. The very medium of clay, far from being primitive, was in many ways superior to more fragile alternatives. A clay tablet, once sun-dried or fired in a kiln, became virtually indestructible, which is why hundreds of thousands of these documents have survived for millennia, waiting in the rubble of ancient cities to tell their stories. To understand the dubsar is to understand that they were the indispensable cogs in the machinery of state, religion, and commerce. In the vast palace and temple complexes, they were the accountants, tracking the inflow of taxes in the form of grain, livestock, and precious metals. They drafted legal documents for marriages, adoptions, and business partnerships, their precise wording carrying the full force of the law. In the realm of religion, they meticulously copied and composed hymns to the gods, recorded elaborate rituals, and documented omens believed to be messages from the divine. And they were also the world's first authors, composing great literary works like the Epic of Gilgamesh, ensuring that these stories of heroism, friendship, and the quest for immortality would resonate across thousands of years. The tools of their trade were varied and specific to the task at hand. Small, palm-sized tablets were used for quick notes, letters, or receipts. Larger, multi-column tablets were reserved for lengthy literary or scientific texts. Particularly important documents, like royal inscriptions or law codes, were often written on clay prisms or cylinders, their durable shape designed to preserve the message for eternity. Perhaps the most iconic example of their work is the Code of Hammurabi. This monumental legal text, inscribed on a towering black stone stele, was not the work of the king himself, but of teams of highly skilled royal scribes. Their job was to meticulously carve his 282 laws into the stone for all to see, creating a permanent record that would standardize justice across the Babylonian Empire. The precision of their work, the flawless alignment of the cuneiform characters, and the sheer scale of the undertaking stand as a powerful testament to their skill and importance. They were not mere copyists, they were the architects of information management, developing systems for filing, cataloging, and storing tablets in vast libraries and archives that resemble our modern databases. The efficiency of their work allowed for the management of resources on a scale previously unimaginable, facilitating trade across vast distances and enabling the coordination of large labor forces for building projects and irrigation systems. The legacy of the Mesopotamian scribe is nothing less than the foundation of recorded history. Their simple reed stylus initiated a revolution in communication that separated prehistory from history, giving us a direct window into the minds, lives, and laws of humanity's first great civilizations. It challenges us to consider our own methods of preserving information in the digital age and what might remain of our culture thousands of years from now. Now, let's step into the intense, shimmering heat of a Roman glass workshop, where our next tool redefined an entire industry. This is the glassblower's pipe, a long, unassuming iron rod that became the engine of a manufacturing revolution. Before its invention, glass was a painstakingly rare and expensive commodity, crafted through slow, labor-intensive methods like core forming or casting. A single small vessel could represent days of work, placing it firmly in the realm of the elite. But around the 1st century before the Common Era, somewhere in the glassmaking hubs of the Levant, a monumental breakthrough occurred. An unknown artisan discovered that by dipping the end of a hollow iron pipe into a vat of molten glass, they could gather a glowing, viscous glob of the material. Then, by blowing gently through the other end of the pipe, they could inflate this gather into a bubble that could be shaped, stretched, and manipulated into an almost infinite variety of forms. This was the birth of free blowing, an innovation so powerful it would democratize glass across the Roman Empire within a single generation. The practitioner of this new magic was the Vitrarius, and his simple pipe was the key that unlocked mass production for the ancient world. The workshop of a Vitrarius was a symphony of controlled chaos centered around the fierce heat of the furnace. Archaeologists, particularly those studying the incredibly preserved sites of Pompeii and Herculaneum, have been able to reconstruct the entire production line. The main furnace was a large, stone-built kiln that maintained a constant, searing temperature to keep the glass in a molten state. The Vitrarius would work quickly, gathering a precise amount of glass on the end of his pipe from the main furnace pot. He would then roll the glowing mass on a flat marble slab, known as a marva, to cool its surface slightly and create a uniform shape. This was the crucial first step before bringing the pipe to his lips. His breath was his primary tool. The pressure, duration, and steadiness of his blow determined the initial form of the vessel, but his hands were just as important. Using a variety of simple but effective tools like wooden blocks, tongs, and shears, he would shape the soft glass, adding handles, pinching spouts, or flaring rims. For more complex or standardized shapes, he might then transfer the still pliable glass into a hinged clay or metal mold and give a final blow, forcing the glass to take on the mold's intricate pattern. This technique of mold blowing allowed for the rapid production of decorated ware, from cups with geometric designs to bottles featuring the faces of gods or emperors. The economic and social impact of this new technology cannot be overstated. Almost overnight, glass transformed from an exotic luxury into an affordable, everyday material for the common citizen. The vitrarii produced goods for every conceivable purpose. They crafted delicate, paper-thin perfume bottles and drinking cups that showcased the clarity and color of their contents. They made sturdy, thick-walled storage jars and jugs for the kitchen and pantry. They produced window panes, a luxury that had previously been limited to sheets of thinly sliced alabaster, bringing light into Roman homes for the first time. This explosion of availability was fueled by the sheer speed of production. A skilled team in a single workshop could produce hundreds of vessels in a day, an output that was simply unimaginable with older methods. This led to the establishment of industrial-scale glassmaking districts, not just in Italy but across the empire, from Cologne in Germany to the Levant. These workshops would often be located near sources of fuel and the essential raw material, sand. The high-quality sand from the river Belus in modern-day Israel was particularly famed throughout the ancient world for its purity, which produced the clearest glass. The resulting products were then traded up and down Roman roads and sea lanes, becoming one of the empire's most ubiquitous and visible commodities. Perhaps the most hauntingly vivid window into this world comes once again from Pompeii. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius did not just freeze a city in time, it froze an economy in action. In one workshop, archaeologists found the furnace still filled with its final charge of raw glass, a batch that was never finished. Nearby, a Vitrarius's pipe was discovered, left where it was dropped in the panic. And throughout the city, shops have been excavated with shelves still lined with the glassblowers, whereas bowls, bottles, and flasks waiting for customers who would never come. This snapshot reveals a thriving, bustling industry operating at a scale and sophistication that rivals early modern production. It forces us to ask a profound question about their craft. Without pyrometers or digital controls, how did they achieve such consistent, high-quality results? The answer lies in a deep, generational knowledge of fire and material. The master glassblower was a true pyrotechnician, reading the color and viscosity of the molten glass with a practiced eye. He knew exactly how long to reheat the piece in the glory hole, a secondary heating chamber, to keep it workable. He understood how different mineral additives would affect the color. Cobalt for a deep blue, manganese for a purple amethyst hue, or antimony for an opaque white. This empirical, hands-on mastery of chemistry and thermodynamics, passed down from master to apprentice, was their true technology. The legacy of the Roman Vitrarius is all around us, in every glass window and bottle we use today. Their revolutionary iron pipe set in motion a chain of innovation that stretches in an unbroken line to our modern glass factories, a permanent testament to ancient ingenuity that quite literally shaped the world we see through. But the world of the Druid extended far beyond the sacred grove and into the very heart of Celtic society, where they served as the supreme authority in matters of law, history, and knowledge. They were the judges, settling complex disputes between tribes with rulings that were considered final and divinely inspired. They were the historians, memorizing the genealogies of chieftains and the epic tales of heroes across generations, preserving the cultural identity of their people without ever committing a single word to writing. They were the advisors to kings, their counsel sought before any major decision, from declaring war to forging alliances, because their understanding of the world was considered the most complete. This immense intellectual responsibility required a training period that could last 20 years, where aspiring druids would memorize vast amounts of poetry, law, astronomy, and natural philosophy entirely through oral tradition. This commitment to memory over text was not a sign of primitiveness but a deliberate philosophical choice, a belief that the most sacred knowledge was too powerful to be entrusting to inert, physical objects and must instead live and breathe within the mind of the learned. The sickle, therefore, becomes a symbol of this vast and holistic understanding. Its use in harvesting medicinal plants points to the druid's role as a healer, a master of an advanced herbal pharmacopoeia. Classical sources and later Irish texts describe a deep, empirical knowledge of botany, where specific plants were gathered at specific lunar phases or seasons to maximize their potency. They would have used the sickle to carefully harvest plants like mistletoe, believed to be a cure-all and a protector against evil, but also countless other herbs for poultices, teas, and salves to treat wounds, fevers, and infections. This practice was a fusion of spiritual ritual and keen observation of nature's effects, a precursor to modern medicine that acknowledged the interconnectedness of the physical and the spiritual realms. The reverence for the natural world was absolute. Every tree, spring, and animal was seen as possessing a spirit and a purpose. The druid was the interlocutor between this animate, vibrant world and the human community, interpreting omens in the flight of birds, the patterns of entrails, or the movement of the stars to guide their people. Archaeology, while challenged by the druids' lack of written records and the perishable nature of their primary tools, offers tantalizing clues. Ritual sites across the Celtic world, from the bogs of Ireland to the forests of Gaul, have yielded evidence of carefully orchestrated ceremonies. While a specific golden sickle has never been found, deposits of other ritually significant metalwork, including cauldrons, torques, and weapons, suggest a world where valuable objects were offered to the gods in watery places. The famous Lindo Man, a body preserved in an English bog, is believed by some to be evidence of a druidic sacrifice, a possible victim of a triple death ritual involving strangulation, bludgeoning, and throat cutting, his last meal containing traces of mistletoe pollen. This grim find, while controversial, illustrates the darker aspects of the druids' sacred duties as described by Roman commentators, who viewed their practices with a mixture of fear and fascination. It paints a picture of a belief system where the balance of the world was maintained through extreme acts of devotion and exchange with the divine. The eventual decline of the druids was as dramatic as their teachings were secretive. With the expansion of the Roman Empire into Gaul and Britain, they were seen as a threat to Roman authority, the unifying cultural force that could rally resistance. The Roman armies systematically targeted their centers of learning, most famously destroying the Druidic stronghold on the island of Anglesey in a brutal military campaign described by the historian Tacitus. Combined with the spread of Christianity in the following centuries, which offered a new, text-based spiritual framework, the ancient Druidic tradition faded into the mists of history and legend. Their profound, orally transmitted wisdom, accumulated over centuries of observation, ritual, and philosophical inquiry, was almost entirely lost. The golden sickle makes us wonder what deep understandings of ecology, astronomy, and governance vanished with them. It stands as a powerful reminder of a completely different way of seeing the universe, one where humanity was not separate from nature but an intimate, respectful, and accountable part of its sacred whole. Now we travel from the structured bureaucracy of the Roman Empire to the towering Andes of South America, to encounter a system of record-keeping so brilliantly abstract it challenges our very definition of writing. Our next tool is not a single object but a complex language of fiber and knots, the Quipu. Picture a primary chord from which dozens of subsidiary chords cascade like a fringe, each one a different color, each tied with a series of intricate knots. To the untrained eye, it resembles a tangled collection of decorative strings, but in the hands of a Quipu, an Inca accountant and administrator, this was a dynamic, three-dimensional database, a tool that managed an empire without a single written word. This was the information superhighway of the Andes, a technology of memory and mathematics that allowed the Inca to govern their vast, mountainous territory with breathtaking efficiency and precision. The Quipu was the master of this system, a highly trained professional whose mind was the living computer that could both encode and decode the stories these knots held. The sophistication of the Quipu code is a marvel of information design. Anthropologists and mathematicians who have studied the few hundred surviving examples have begun to crack its complex syntax. The system was multidimensional. The type of knot, whether a figure 8, a long knot, or the critical decimal-based cluster known as a granny knot, represented numerical values. The position of the knot on the cord indicated its place value, with units, tens, hundreds, and so on moving further down the strand, but the data went far beyond simple numbers. The color of the cord was its category label. A brown cord might represent a count of potatoes, a white cord could signify silver, and a red cord might denote the number of soldiers available from a specific province. The material of the cord itself, cotton or wool from a llama or alpaca, could also carry meaning, perhaps differentiating between civilian and sacred records. Even the spin and ply of the thread, the direction the knots were tied, and the overall arrangement of the cords contributed to a rich, layered system capable of recording complex quantitative and qualitative information. The role of the Quipu was therefore one of immense responsibility and required a formidable intellect. These were not simple clerks, they were the empire's statisticians, auditors, and historians rolled into one. Their training was a long and rigorous oral tradition, where a master would teach an apprentice the vast color-coded lexicon and the mathematical principles of the knots. A Quipu stationed in a provincial storehouse would use his quipus to maintain a real-time inventory of the empire's wealth. How much maize was in the granaries, how many blankets were in the warehouses, how many men were eligible for labor drafts. This information was not static. Messengers or chasquis would run along the Inca's extensive road network, carrying updated quipus from the provinces to the capital, Cusco, allowing the central administration to monitor the entire economy, redistribute resources to areas in need, and plan for future projects. The Quipu was the instrument that made the Inca redistributive economy possible, ensuring that surplus from one region could support another, preventing famine and fostering stability across diverse and challenging landscapes. The true depth of the Quipu's potential is hinted at in Spanish colonial records, which suggest that these knotted cords were not solely for accounting. Some chroniclers reported that quipus were used to record history, genealogies, and even laws. It is believed that certain quipus, perhaps now lost to time or yet to be correctly identified, were narrative devices capable of storing the epic tales of Inca kings and the myths of their gods. This idea transforms the Quipu from a mere calculator into a potential alternative form of literature, a way of weaving stories rather than writing them. The tragic loss of this profession is directly tied to the Spanish conquest. The conquistadors, viewing the Quipu as a pagan artifact or simply incapable of understanding its complexity, systematically destroyed thousands of them. Furthermore, the Catholic Church, intent on eradicating native beliefs and practices, targeted the Quipu themselves, seeing them as priests of a rival system of knowledge. With the masters gone and their apprentices killed or silenced, the living language of the Quipu was largely extinguished within a few generations. This loss is poignantly underscored by archaeological finds. Quipus are sometimes discovered in the dry, preserving environments of ancient burials, placed alongside their makers as one of their most important and cherished possessions. a testament to the vital role they played in both life and death. The few that survive are like books in a library where we know the alphabet but have lost most of the dictionary. Researchers continue to work tirelessly, using advanced imaging and data analysis to try and fully decipher their secrets. The Quipu tool forces us to expand our definition of writing and data storage. It stands as a stunningly elegant and efficient system, perfectly adapted to its environment and purpose, proving that human ingenuity can find profoundly different paths to the same goal, the preservation and communication of knowledge. It represents one of history's great intellectual tragedies, an entire profession, a complete system of information technology, deliberately dismantled and lost, leaving us to wonder what other secrets of the past were tied into those now silent knots. Yet just as one empire mastered knots to manage its resources, another, far to the east, developed a machine to read the very tremors of the earth itself. Our journey now takes us to the brilliant, intellectually fertile court of China's Han Dynasty, where a different kind of specialist worked, the imperial inventor. Here, philosophy, divination, and raw mechanical genius converge to produce one of history's most astonishing devices, Zhang Heng's seismoscope. Imagine a magnificent bronze vessel, perhaps 6 feet in diameter, adorned with 8 dragons snaking down its sides, each clutching a bronze ball in its jaws. Below each dragon sat a corresponding bronze toad, its mouth open in anticipation. To the average court official, it was a beautiful, if mysterious, sculpture. But to the master who built it, this was a precision instrument, a finely tuned machine designed to do the seemingly impossible: detect the direction of an earthquake from hundreds of miles away. The intricate bronze components, the carefully balanced pendulums hidden within the vessel, the delicately crafted levers connected to each dragon's head, the perfectly weighted balls, were not decorations. They were the heart of a 2,000-year-old early warning system. The mind behind this marvel, Zhang Heng, was the epitome of the Han Dynasty court scientist. He was not a specialist in a single field but a polymath, an astronomer who mapped 2,500 stars and theorized about the moon's light, a master cartographer, a renowned poet, and a high-ranking government official. His profession was one of synthesis, of weaving together the threads of what his culture knew. In the Han worldview, there was no hard division between the metaphysical and the mechanical, between the will of heaven and the workings of a gear. Earthquakes were not random events. They were seen as ominous disruptions in the cosmic balance, signs of heavenly displeasure or shifts in the flow of earthly energy known as Kai. Zhang Heng's task was to create a tool that could interpret these celestial warnings, translating unseen terrestrial vibrations into a clear, actionable signal that the imperial court could understand and respond to. His seismoscope was a physical bridge between the philosophical concept of a disordered universe and the practical need to send aid to a stricken province. The proposed internal mechanism, deduced from historical texts and modern reconstructions, is a masterpiece of intuitive physics. Hidden inside the ornate bronze jar, historians believe, was a single, inverted pendulum, a heavy mass suspended from a flexible pivot at the top. When seismic waves from a distant quake reached the capital, they would cause the entire vessel to shudder. The suspended mass, due to its inertia, would tend to stay still, acting as a stable reference point. This relative motion between the swinging vessel and the stationary mass would trigger one of 8 levers arranged around the interior. The activated lever would then trip a mechanism causing the corresponding dragon on the outside of the vessel to release its bronze ball, which would drop with a loud, clanging report into the mouth of the waiting toad below. The direction of the quake was instantly and dramatically revealed by which toad caught the ball. This design displays a profound understanding of wave propagation and inertial principles that would not be formally defined in the West for another 1500 years. Creating such a device required the collaboration of multiple elite craftspeople, each a master in their own right. The bronze casters who made the components faced a monumental challenge. They had to produce the large, perfectly spherical main vessel with a consistent wall thickness to ensure uniform resonance. The 8 dragons and 8 toads each had to be cast with exquisite detail and near-identical weight distribution to maintain the machine's overall balance. But the most critical components were the internal ones never seen by the public, the pendulum and the set of 8 delicate levers. These parts had to be crafted and tuned with incredible precision. The leverage, the tension, the counterweights all had to be calibrated so that the mechanism was sensitive enough to react to faint tremors from afar, yet stable enough to ignore the rumble of a passing cart or the vibrations of a bustling palace. The assembly of these internal components demanded the steady hand and keen intuition of a master watchmaker, a profession that wouldn't formally exist for centuries. It was a fusion of artistic metallurgy and precision engineering on a scale rarely attempted in the ancient world. The most compelling validation of Zhang Heng's invention comes not from his time but from ours. In 2007, a team of scientists and historians in China successfully built a full-scale, working replica of the seismoscope based on the best available theories of its design. They calibrated it using waves from modern earthquakes, and to their astonishment, the ancient design proved remarkably effective. Their replica detected the direction of simulated quakes with a stunning degree of accuracy, demonstrating that the principle was not merely theoretical folklore but a viable, functional technology. This successful reconstruction forces a profound shift in our perception of ancient technological capability. It moves the seismoscope from the realm of mythical curiosity into the annals of legitimate scientific history. It confirms that Zhang Heng and his team of artisans possessed a sophisticated, practical grasp of physics that was centuries ahead of its time. This single device shatters the stereotype of ancient innovation being purely accidental or incremental, revealing instead a culture capable of directed, theory-based engineering to solve a specific, critical problem of state security and humanitarian response. The legacy of the Han Dynasty's imperial inventors challenges us to look deeper at other ancient marvels, to wonder what other sophisticated technologies have been dismissed as legend simply because we lost the instructions for how they were built. Now, let's step away from the intricate mechanics of the Han court and into the smoky, roaring heart of a Viking forge, where our next tool embodies a far more visceral and fundamental kind of power. These are not delicate levers or polished bronze, but heavy iron tongs, simple in form, immense in importance. Grasped in the soot-blackened hand of the smither, the Viking blacksmith, these tongs were the ultimate extension of his will, the critical interface between human strength and the mesmerizing, liquid heat of the metal. In a society often defined by the warrior and the explorer, it was the smith who truly armed the age. His workshop was the industrial engine of the Viking world, a place where raw ore, painstakingly won from bog iron, was transformed into the very instruments that enabled epic voyages, fierce raids, and prosperous trade across continents. Without the smith's mastery, there are no longships to cross oceans, no axes to clear forests for farms, no tools to build homes, and certainly no legendary swords to be sung about in sagas. He was the essential artisan, the cornerstone of survival, ambition, and culture. The true measure of the Viking smith's genius, however, lies not in the sheer force of his hammer strikes, but in his profound, almost alchemical understanding of the materials themselves. Metallurgical analysis of surviving artifacts reveals a level of sophistication that rivals modern engineering. The most famous examples are the revered Ulfbert swords, an elite class of weapon that carried the maker's name inscribed down the blade. These were not simple iron bars. They were made from a form of high-carbon steel known as crucible steel, a material of exceptional purity and flexibility. The source of this steel has been a subject of intense debate among historians. Some evidence suggests it may have been imported via vast trade routes that stretched all the way to the Middle East or Central Asia, acquired by Viking traders in exchange for furs, amber, and slaves. This means the smith was working with a global material, a premium ingredient that he then had to master. But whether using imported steel or locally produced iron, the smith's real magic happened at the forge. Through a process called pattern welding, he would expertly twist and forge together rods of iron and steel, then hammer them into a single composite blade. This technique created a weapon that was both incredibly hard along its sharp, steel edge and fabulously flexible and shock-absorbent along its iron-rich core, a deadly combination that could slice through lesser weapons and armor without shattering. The process produced stunning, swirling patterns on the surface of the metal, like liquid wood grain, a beautiful and unmistakable signature of supreme craftsmanship. To achieve these results, the smith's workshop, or smithy, was a hub of specialized tools and relentless activity. The centerpiece was, of course, the stone forge, fed by bellows to pump air and drive the temperature high enough to make iron glow a brilliant yellow-white. His anvil, often a large, heavy block of iron set on a sturdy stump, was his altar. His hammers, in various weights and shapes, were for precise shaping. And his tongs, our focal tool, were his unwavering grip on the work. They came in different sizes and jaw patterns, each designed for a specific task, some with broad, flat jaws for holding large workpieces like axe heads, others with finer, pointed tips for manipulating smaller items like rivets or intricate jewelry. The smith's skill was a symphony of coordination, one hand wielding the hammer with rhythmic, precise blows, the other constantly maneuvering the red-hot metal with the tongs against the anvil, all while reading the color of the heat to know the exact moment to strike, fold, or quench. It was a dangerous, exhausting dance of fire, muscle, and split-second timing. The immense respect afforded to these master craftsmen is powerfully illustrated by how they were treated in death. Archaeology provides moving testimony from burial sites across the Viking world. It is not uncommon to find the graves of smiths buried with their full toolkit laid carefully beside them, their hammers, their anvil, their files, and their indispensable tongs. This was a profound honor, a practice usually reserved for warriors interred with their weapons or chieftains with their ships. Including these tools signified that the smith's craft was not just his job, it was his core identity, a skill so vital that it was believed he would need it in the afterlife. It elevated him to a status nearing the mystical. In Norse mythology, the gods themselves had a divine smith, Brokkr, who crafted some of their most powerful artifacts, including Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir. The earthly smith, through his command of fire and metal, was seen as channeling a similar transformative power. This legacy of the smither forces us to reconsider what true innovation looks like. Without pyrometers to measure temperature or microscopes to analyze crystalline structures, how did they consistently produce such superior, reliable metalwork? The answer lies in a deep, generational, and sensory wisdom. A master smith knew his material by sight, sound, and feel. He could judge the temperature of the steel by the exact shade of red, orange, or white it glowed. He could hear the subtle differences in the ring of his hammer strikes, telling him about the metal's density and integrity. He could feel the resistance and flexibility through the tongs in his hand. This knowledge was passed down from master to apprentice through years of grueling, hands-on training, a living database of technique that was as valuable as any written manual. The products of their forges, the sturdy nails that held longships together, the sharp axes that built settlements, the fine brooches that denoted status, and the legendary swords that carved out history, are the very artifacts that define the Viking Age for us today. They are a permanent testament to a profession that didn't just make things, but literally forged the tools of expansion, the weapons of conquest, and the goods of commerce that connected a vast and dynamic world. But to truly appreciate the papyrus press, we must first journey to the banks of the Nile and understand the raw material itself. The papyrus plant was far more than just a tall, graceful reed swaying in the marshland. It was the literal pulp of Egyptian civilization. The papermakers, a specialized class of artisans, knew exactly when and how to harvest these plants for optimal quality. Using sharp, curved knives, they would carefully cut the triangular stems, selecting only the choicest, tallest stalks from the heart of the clump. The outer green rind was then skillfully stripped away to reveal the precious, white pith within. This pith was the key ingredient, the cellulose-rich core that would undergo its miraculous transformation. The initial preparation was a testament to their deep botanical knowledge, recognizing that the plant's strength and flexibility, when processed correctly, could become a durable surface for writing. This was not a haphazard gathering of reeds. It was the first deliberate step in a meticulous, multi-stage industrial process that the Egyptians perfected over centuries. The real magic, however, happened in the papermaker's workshop, a humid space filled with the earthy scent of wet plants and the sound of tapping mallets. Here, the prepared pith was taken to the next level. The inner pith was sliced longitudinally into thin, narrow strips. These strips were then laid out side by side, slightly overlapping, on a hard, absorbent surface like a wooden board. A second layer of strips was then placed directly on top, but this time running perpendicular to the first layer. This cross-hatched arrangement was absolutely crucial. It created a natural laminate, giving the final sheet its incredible strength and preventing it from easily tearing along a single grain. Once the two layers were perfectly aligned, the craftsman would begin the pressing stage. He would soak the arrangement with water from the Nile, which acted as a natural adhesive due to its high mineral content and organic matter. Then, using a heavy wooden press or a smooth mallet, he would apply immense steady pressure, sometimes for several days, physically beating and compressing the layers together. The sap from the plant itself, combined with the Nile water, would form a natural glue, bonding the strips into a single, cohesive sheet. This newly formed sheet was then the focus of the final, finishing touches. It was placed under a heavy weight, often a stone or another part of the wooden press, to dry completely in the hot Egyptian sun. As it dried, the surface naturally became smoother and lighter in color. The final step was one of meticulous artistry. The dried sheet was painstakingly polished with a smooth stone, a piece of ivory, or a shell to create that famous, slightly ribbed and perfect writing surface. The quality control was exceptional. The finest, smoothest sheets were reserved for religious texts and royal decrees, while slightly coarser grades were used for everyday accounting and personal letters. These individual sheets, or collimata, were then joined together with a flour-based paste, with the horizontal fibers always on the inside of the roll for flexibility, creating the long scrolls we associate with ancient texts. The edge of the scroll was reinforced, and it was often attached to a wooden roller, turning it into a durable, portable, and organized document ready for the scribe's ink. The impact of this invention, however, stretched far beyond the borders of Egypt, transforming the entire Mediterranean world. Papyrus became one of ancient Egypt's most lucrative and sought-after exports, a state-controlled monopoly that generated immense wealth. The demand was insatiable. The Greeks and Romans, whose own writing surfaces like wax tablets or animal skins were far less practical for lengthy texts, imported papyrus in enormous quantities. Major trading ports like Byblos, a name so associated with the material that it gave us the word Bible, became central hubs for its distribution. Vast rolls of papyrus were shipped across the sea, facilitating an explosion of record-keeping, literature, and bureaucratic administration from Rome to Athens. It became the standard medium for everything from legal contracts and government archives to the literary works of philosophers and poets. The Roman Empire, in particular, ran on papyrus. Its legions, tax collectors, and magistrates depended on a constant supply to manage their vast territories. This thriving trade network made the papyrus maker not just a local craftsman, but an unwitting yet essential enabler of classical civilization itself. The true testament to their extraordinary skill is the fact that so many of their products have endured. While papyrus is often thought of as fragile, when preserved in the dry, sterile air of the Egyptian desert, whether in tombs, sealed jars, or buried in ancient rubbish heaps, it possesses a remarkable longevity. The famous Edwin Smith papyrus, a surgical treatise, and the Rind mathematical papyrus have survived for over 3,500 years, their texts still clearly legible. These surviving documents are not just historical records, they are direct physical evidence of the papyrus maker's craft, their smooth surface and joined seams still visible after millennia. They allow us to read the words of ancient Egyptians in their own hand, a connection made possible by the durability and quality of the medium they created. This incredible preservation forces us to ask a profound question about the flow of history itself. How much of our understanding of the ancient world, from its laws and literature to its daily receipts, is dependent on the ingenuity of these papermakers? Their humble press and simple tools did more than just flatten reeds. They provided the physical vessel for knowledge, enabling ideas to be recorded, shared, and preserved across generations and empires, ultimately shaping the very foundation of Western history and thought. Yet for all its apparent simplicity, the Gromer's true power was unlocked by the mind of the professional who wielded it, the Agrimancer. This Roman land surveyor was far more than a man with a measuring stick. He was a highly trained expert in geometry, law, and urban planning, a cornerstone of the empire's relentless expansion. His rigorous education equipped him with the complex mathematical principles needed to calculate angles, gradients, and distances across vast and often unforgiving terrain. The backbone of Roman infrastructure, from the arrow-straight roads that connected distant provinces to the life-giving aqueducts that fed its bustling cities, was quite literally drawn in the dirt by the Agrimancer and his Gromer. His work began long before any stone was laid, meticulously mapping the countryside, dividing land into precise grids for veteran soldiers, and establishing the sacred boundaries of new cities with ritualistic precision. He was the unsung architect of Roman order, transforming chaotic landscapes into organized, manageable, and productive territory. His profession demanded a unique blend of theoretical knowledge and practical ingenuity, a fusion of the classroom and the field that allowed him to impose human will upon the natural world. To understand the sheer scale of their achievement, one need only consider the challenge of an aqueduct. These were not simple canals dug into the earth. They were masterpieces of gravitational engineering, designed to carry water for dozens of miles across valleys and over rivers while maintaining a constant, gentle downhill slope. The Gromer was the key to this entire endeavor. The surveyor and his team would first use the instrument to establish a perfectly straight line, the intended path of the aqueduct. Then, using a series of graduated rods and levels, They would take meticulous elevation measurements along this entire route. The precision required was astonishing. An error of just a few centimeters per kilometer could mean the water would either flow too slowly and stagnate or rush with too much force and destroy the channel walls. The Agrimancer's calculations determined the exact path and the necessary height of the soaring arcades, like those of the Pont du Gard in France, that were built to maintain that crucial gradient across wide river valleys. This was engineering on a monumental scale, all guided by the unwavering line sighted through a simple wooden cross and 4 weighted strings. The legacy of their work is not confined to history books. It is etched permanently into the landscape of Europe and beyond. The enduring presence of structures like the Pont du Gard, which has stood for nearly 2,000 years, or the Aqua Claudia in Rome, which still parts sections of the modern city, is a silent tribute to the surveyor's flawless accuracy. But their influence extends far beyond these majestic monuments. The very layout of countless European towns, particularly those founded as Roman colonies, still bear the unmistakable imprint of the Gromer's work. Their street plans often follow the rigid, right-angled grid of a centuriation system, a method of land division implemented by the Agrimancer that allocated square plots to settlers. This method of urban planning, emphasizing order, efficiency, and easy navigation, became a template that has influenced city design ever since. The modern world's reliance on straight roads, precise property boundaries, and complex public water systems all find a direct lineage in the principles established by these ancient professionals. This profound and lasting impact forces a compelling question about the nature of innovation itself. In an age without laser levels, GPS satellites, or computer-aided design, how did the Agrimancer achieve such a staggering degree of accuracy that his work continues to stand after 2 millennia? The answer lies not in complex technology, but in a deep, foundational understanding of geometry and physics, combined with meticulous, patient methodology. The Romans perfected the art of using simple tools to their absolute maximum potential. The Gromer, in the hands of a true master, was all that was needed. It teaches a powerful lesson to modern engineers and planners, that technological sophistication is not always a substitute for sound fundamental principles and painstaking care. The Agrimancer's profession laid the literal groundwork for the modern built environment, demonstrating that the most enduring structures are born not from the most advanced tools, but from the most advanced understanding of how to use them. From the orderly grids laid out by Roman surveyors, we now travel even further back in time to the warm, fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia, where our next tool reveals a profession that was quite literally woven into the fabric of daily survival and spiritual practice. Envision a substantial, wide-mouthed ceramic vat, its coarse surface stained from countless batches of a frothy, nourishing beverage. This was the heart of the Mesopotamian brewery, a vessel where the alchemy of fermentation transformed simple grains into beer, a dietary staple, an economic commodity, and a sacred offering that sustained one of the world's first great civilizations. The individual who mastered this vat, the brewer, held a position of surprising importance, and the story of this profession is uniquely tied to the women, known as brewsters, who dominated this essential craft. Their work was so vital that it was celebrated in poetry, protected by law, and offered to the gods, revealing a society where the act of brewing was far more than mere food production. It was a cherished and respected art form central to Mesopotamian life. The process of brewing in ancient Mesopotamia was a complex and multi-stage operation that required a deep, empirical understanding of biochemistry long before the science had a name. It all began with barley, or sometimes emmer wheat, which was first moistened and allowed to sprout in a controlled process known as malting. This crucial step activated enzymes within the grain that would later convert its starches into fermentable sugars. The malted grain was then gently dried and ground into a coarse flour called bapir. This bapir was then mixed with water and dates in the large fermentation vat. The dates were not merely a sweetener, they were a source of wild yeast which would kickstart the fermentation process, turning the sugary liquid into alcohol. The mixture, known as beer mash, was then left to ferment in these large jars, often buried partially in the cool earth to maintain a stable temperature. After fermentation, the resulting liquid was not like our modern, crystal-clear beer. It was a thick, porridge-like substance packed with grains and solids. To enjoy it, Mesopotamians used special straws with built-in filters at the tip to sip the liquid from a communal vessel, avoiding the sediment at the bottom. This entire intricate process, from malting to sipping, was managed with a suite of specialized tools beyond the main vat, including finely woven strainers made of reeds or cloth to help clarify the brew and smaller, sealed jars for storage and transport. The most fascinating aspect of this profession is its strong association with women. In the early Sumerian and Babylonian periods, brewing was predominantly, though not exclusively, a female domain. These women, the brewsters, were often operating as small-scale entrepreneurs or as workers attached to large temple or palace households. They were not amateurs, they were skilled professionals whose craft provided a significant source of income and social standing. Cuneiform tablets from the city of Ur detail the operations of a brewing business run by a woman named Quipu, who managed a staff of workers and supplied beer to the royal palace. The famous Code of Hammurabi, one of the world's oldest legal codes, includes specific regulations that govern the operation of taverns, which were often run by women. These laws set prices for beer and outlined severe punishments for brewsters who overcharged or who allowed seditious plots to be hatched on their premises, indicating that these establishments were important social hubs as well as commercial enterprises. This central role gave women a rare degree of economic independence and influence within the structured hierarchy of Mesopotamian society. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of beer's profound cultural significance is its divine connection. The Sumerians had a goddess specifically dedicated to this cherished beverage, Ninkasi, whose name translates to the lady who fills the mouth. The hymn to Ninkasi, inscribed on a clay tablet around 1800 before the Common Era, is far more than a simple song of praise. It is a beautifully poetic, yet meticulously detailed, technical recipe for brewing beer. Each verse of the hymn corresponds to a step in the brewing process, from soaking the malt in a jar to mixing the honey and wine with the brew. This ingenious composition served a dual purpose. It was a sacred text used in religious rituals to honor the goddess, ensuring her blessing upon the brew, but it also functioned as an oral technical manual, a way to accurately transmit the complex brewing instructions from one generation of brewsters to the next in a society where literacy was limited. Beer itself was considered a gift from the gods, a vital source of nutrition and safe hydration in a land where water sources could often be contaminated. It was a standard part of the daily ration for workers building ziggurats and temples, and it was poured out as a libation to appease and honor the deities. The brewster's vat, therefore, was a conduit between the earthly and the divine, producing a substance that nourished the bodies of laborers and the spirits of the gods alike. This deep integration of beer into every layer of society forces us to reconsider our modern perceptions of this ancient drink. How did these early masters of the vat achieve such remarkable consistency and quality without thermometers, purified yeast strains, or precise measuring tools. Their expertise was built upon generations of careful observation, a sensory knowledge passed from mother to daughter. A master brewster would know the exact stage of malting by the length of the sprout, the right temperature for fermentation by feeling the warmth of the vat with her hand, and the completion of the process by the smell and taste of the brew. This was a science of the senses, a practiced intuition that ensured every batch met the high standards expected by both palace and temple. The legacy of the Mesopotamian brewster is a powerful reminder that some of the most foundational technologies of human civilization were developed not in male-dominated workshops of metal and stone, but in the domestic spaces where women transformed basic ingredients into the sustenance that fueled the growth of cities, the construction of monuments, and the very rituals that connected humanity to the cosmos. Their large ceramic vat was the crucible where grain, water, and ingenuity were fermented into a drink that built an empire. But the true genius of the astrolabe was not just in its construction, but in its breathtaking versatility, a quality unlocked by the engraver's precise work on its many components. At its heart was a circular plate or timpan, which was engraved with a map of the sky for a specific latitude. A master craftsman would produce a whole set of these interchangeable plates for different cities, one for Athens, another for Alexandria, another for Rome, allowing a single instrument to be used across the known world. Over this plate sat the reter, a complex web-like star chart that was a masterpiece of pierced metalwork with pointers marking the positions of the brightest stars. This reter could be rotated over the timpan to represent the apparent movement of the heavens throughout the night. On the back of the instrument, the engraver would inscribe a wealth of other scales, a calendar for converting dates, a scale for measuring the sun's altitude, and often a shadow square for trigonometry calculations. This single handheld device could tell the time by day or night, calculate the length of daylight, determine the direction of Mecca for prayer, aid in land surveying, and even cast horoscopes. It was, in effect, a portable analog computer, a model of the universe whose accuracy was entirely dependent on the flawless lines etched by the engraver's beren. The workshop of an astrolabe maker was a unique fusion of an observatory, a mathematician's study, and a metalsmith's forge. Here, the boundaries between science and craft dissolved completely. The process began not with metal, but with paper and complex astronomical tables. The craftsman, who was often the astronomer himself, would first perform a series of intricate geometrical calculations to plot the precise positions of stars and the curves of altitude lines for his chosen latitude. These designs were then meticulously transferred onto the carefully cast and hammer-flattened brass disc. The actual engraving was a task of immense patience and a supremely steady hand. Using a variety of hardened steel berens, the maker would cut the fine grooves of the scales, his skill ensuring that each line was of a consistent depth and clarity. The creation of the reter was perhaps the most delicate operation, requiring the craftsman to saw out the intricate star-shaped patterns from the brass sheet with tiny fret saws before finishing the edges with files and gravers. This work demanded an intimate knowledge of the metal's properties, how to anneal it to make it soft for working, how to temper it to hold a sharp edge, and how to polish it to a smooth, gleaming finish that would resist tarnishing. The profound and lasting influence of this Greek invention is powerfully illustrated by its journey through other cultures, most notably the medieval Islamic world. As the knowledge of the ancient Greeks was preserved and expanded upon by scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba, the astrolabe was embraced and perfected. Islamic craftsmen became the undisputed masters of the device, producing astrolabes of astonishing beauty and complexity. They refined the mathematical projections, added new scales for Islamic prayer times and the direction of Mecca, the Qibla, and elevated the decoration to a high art form, engraving intricate arabesques and calligraphic inscriptions alongside the scientific scales. These objects became prized possessions of sultans and scholars alike, symbols of both enlightenment and status. The survival of many exquisite Islamic astrolabes in museum collections today stands as a testament to a continuous thread of scientific inquiry that stretched from ancient Greece through the golden age of Islam and eventually into Renaissance Europe, where the instrument once again became a vital tool for explorers and scientists. This journey highlights the astrolabe not as a product of a single culture, but as a monument to universal human curiosity, a tool that transcended languages and empires in its pursuit of mapping the heavens. This incredible device, born from the union of an astronomer's mind and an engraver's hand, fundamentally expanded humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. It provided a physical model that made the abstract clockwork mechanics of the Ptolemaic universe tangible and predictable. By allowing a user to simulate the positions of celestial bodies for any given time and date, it demystified the night sky, transforming it from a realm of capricious gods into a domain governed by knowable mathematical laws. This shift was monumental. It empowered navigators to venture across open oceans with greater confidence. It allowed farmers to better understand the seasons, and it gave theologians and philosophers a new framework for contemplating the order of divine creation. The precise scales engraved onto its brass surface were more than just measurements. They were a language for conversing with the universe, a set of codes that, when deciphered, revealed the time, the season, and the very coordinates of one's existence on Earth. The legacy of the astrolabe maker is therefore immeasurable. Their profession, which so perfectly married the beauty of art with the rigor of science, provided the foundational tools for empirical observation that would eventually lead to the great astronomical revolutions of Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler, forever changing our view of the stars and our world beneath them. Now let's travel across the ocean and deep into the lush rainforests of Mesoamerica, where our next artifact speaks in vibrant color and intricate symbol. Imagine a paintbrush so fine it could only have been crafted for a master's hand, a delicate instrument fashioned from a single, sharpened reed, its tip carefully bound with the soft hair of a small mammal. This was the primary tool of the Mayan Agtizib, a title that translates not merely to scribe but to one who writes and paints. This individual was far more than a simple recorder of events. They were a guardian of cosmic order, a historian, an astronomer, and an artist whose work was considered a sacred dialogue with the gods. In the hierarchical world of the ancient Maya, the Agtizib occupied a place of immense prestige, often being a member of the royal family or the highest nobility. Their name glyphs, proudly displayed within the very works they created, reveal they were celebrated individuals, their identities immortalized alongside the kings and deities they depicted. To hold this brush was to hold the power to shape reality itself, to make the intangible tangible, and to ensure that the deeds of a dynasty and the cycles of the cosmos would echo through eternity. The creation of the materials for their craft was a complex alchemy in itself, a ritualized process that transformed the raw bounty of the jungle into a medium for divine communication. The paper they wrote upon was a world away from Egyptian papyrus or Mesopotamian clay. It was amatul, a resilient, leather-like sheet made from the inner bark of the wild fig tree. The bark was soaked, beaten with a ribbed stone tool until it expanded into a fibrous mesh, and then layered and pounded again into large, smooth sheets that were finally given a thin, white lime plaster coating to create a perfect, bright surface for painting. The pigments for their inks and paints were sourced from a sophisticated palette of minerals and organic materials. A brilliant Maya blue, a famous and astonishingly durable pigment, was created from a rare indigo plant and a special clay heated in a sacred ritual. Reds and oranges came from hematite and cinnabar, yellows from ochre, and a rich, deep black from carbon soot. These powders were meticulously ground on stone pallets and mixed with a binding agent, likely a plant gum or tree resin, to create a vibrant, fluid paint that would adhere to the prepared amatl surface. Every step, from harvesting the bark to grinding the minerals, was imbued with ritual significance, transforming physical matter into a substance capable of bearing sacred knowledge. The training of an Agtisiab was a long and arduous journey that began in childhood, an intellectual and spiritual boot camp reserved for the elite. Under the tutelage of a master scribe, often a relative, the apprentice would first have to achieve fluency in the incredibly complex Mayan writing system. This was not a simple alphabet but a combination of logogram symbols representing whole words and phonetic syllables, all arranged in intricate double-column blocks that could be read in a specific order. Beyond the glyphs themselves, the apprentice had to master the complex calendrical systems that were the backbone of Mayan thought. The 260-day sacred round, the 365-day solar year, and the long count, which tracked time from a mythical starting point thousands of years in the past. They learned the precise iconography for gods, animals, and rituals, understanding that the slightest variation in the curl of a feather or the shape of a god's eye could alter the entire meaning of a text. This was not merely learning to write, it was learning to see and interpret the universe through a highly structured, symbolic lens, a process that took decades to perfect. The supreme example of their genius, and a heartbreaking reminder of all that was lost, is the Dresden Codex. This is one of only 4 Mayan books known to have survived the Spanish conquest, a miraculous survivor that offers a direct window into the mind of the Agtisiab. Its pages, long folded screen strips of amatl, are a breathtakingly beautiful and dense compilation of advanced knowledge. It contains precise astronomical tables that accurately predict the movements of Venus and Mars, elaborate calendars that chart eclipse cycles, and detailed rituals tied to specific dates in the Mayan year. The artistry is staggering. Deities are depicted with fluid, confident lines and vibrant washes of color, engaged in complex scenes of creation and sacrifice. The numerical calculations, represented by elegant bars and dots, reveal a mathematical sophistication that included the concept of zero, a discovery that would not reach Europe for centuries. The Dresden Codex is not a book. It is a portable universe, a masterwork of science and art that stands as the highest achievement of the scribble profession. This lone survivor, however, forces us to confront a cultural catastrophe of unimaginable scale. In the 16th century, Spanish missionaries, led by Bishop Diego de Landa, systematically sought out and burned every Mayan book they could find, viewing them as instruments of devil worship. In a single, infamous auto-da-fe in the town of Mani in 1562, countless codices were consigned to the flames, an act that de Landa himself recorded, noting that the Maya were deeply sorrowful because these books contained the knowledge of their sciences. This was not just the burning of paper, it was the annihilation of a worldview, the silencing of 1,000 voices, the equivalent of burning every library in Europe. The loss is incalculable. We can only wonder what other masterpieces of literature, what detailed historical chronicles, what advanced treatises on medicine and botany were turned to ash in those fires. The few pages of the Dresden, Paris, and Madrid codices are but scattered fragments of a vast intellectual cathedral that once was. The delicate paintbrush of the Agtisiab, therefore, stands as a powerful symbol of both the heights of human creativity and the profound fragility of cultural memory, a stark reminder that knowledge, no matter how carefully recorded, is never permanently safe. Yet while philosophers pondered the cosmos and scribes recorded history, the bustling, crowded cities of the Roman Empire were kept presentable by a far more pungent and practical profession. Step into one of these urban centers, and your nose would quickly lead you to a Follonica, the ancient Roman laundry. Here, our next tool stands as a monument to cleanliness and social ambition, a massive, creaking wooden press. This formidable device, operated by teams of workers, was the final and most crucial step in the fuller's craft, used to apply immense pressure to damp textiles, squeezing out moisture and pressing them into crisp, desirable folds. In a society where appearance was everything, where the bright, snow-white toga of a senator or the clean, well-kept tunic of a merchant spoke volumes about their status and respectability, the fuller was an indispensable figure. His workshop was not a peripheral service but a vital organ of the city's social body, ensuring that the vast population could project an image of order, wealth, and Roman virtue, one pressed garment at a time. The process that culminated at the press, however, was far more complex and far less fragrant than our modern laundering routines. It began in a series of large, deep vats where the dirty laundry was first treated. The primary cleaning agent was both free and abundantly available: human urine. Collected from public latrines or pots placed on street corners, urine was prized for its high ammonia content, a powerful natural degreaser that could break down dirt and oils trapped in the woolen fibers of most Roman clothing. The soiled garments were soaked and trodden upon by workers standing in these vats, who stomped and agitated the cloth with their feet for hours, much like stomping grapes, to work the ammonia-rich liquid through the fabric. After this initial wash, the clothes were moved to a second set of vats where they were thoroughly rinsed with clean water, but the process wasn't complete yet. To achieve the brilliant white that was so highly prized, the textiles were then treated with a special clay called fuller's earth, or sprinkled with sulfur, and then brushed vigorously with a special tool called a spica, a teethed implement that raised the nap of the fabric and helped the bleaching agents penetrate more deeply. Only after this lengthy, multi-stage ordeal were the clothes ready for their final transformation under the weight of the great wooden press. The social world of the fuller is a fascinating glimpse into the economic mobility possible within Roman society. While the work itself was messy, smelly, and physically demanding, it was also incredibly lucrative. The demand for cleaning was constant and widespread, from the everyday tunics of the masses to the elaborate, expensive togas of the elite. As a result, many fullones were not slaves but freedmen, former slaves who had been granted their freedom and often continued practicing the trade they knew, now for their own profit. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii, particularly the famous Follonica of Stephanus, reveals a thriving business operated by a freedman. This establishment, a converted house, features a beautiful atrium and living quarters adorned with frescoes, directly adjacent to the industrial-scale laundry vats and presses in the peristyle garden. This layout speaks volumes. The owner, Stephanus, was a successful businessman who had grown wealthy enough from his laundry to afford a fine home, yet he chose to live and work on the same premises, a testament to both his practicality and his pride in his profitable enterprise. His success story challenges our modern snobbery about certain trades, showing that in the Roman world, a person could literally wash their way to a comfortable life and social standing. The incredible state of preservation in Pompeii offers an unparalleled, almost cinematic snapshot of this profession frozen in time. Walking through the Follonica of Stephanus today, you can still see the large, brick-built dyeing vats, the intricate mosaic floors designed to channel wastewater, and the deep stone washing basins. Most poignant, however, is the discovery of the tools themselves. In one corner, archaeologists found the carbonized remains of the great wooden press, its mechanism forever stilled by the volcanic ash. In another, they uncovered the brushing equipment and even jars that likely held the collected urine, waiting for the next day's wash. This was not a small, home-based operation. It was a full-blown factory, employing a significant number of workers and processing industrial quantities of textiles. The discovery of other pholoniki throughout the city, some smaller and some equally large, paints a picture of a highly competitive and specialized industry, with different establishments perhaps catering to different clienteles or specializing in specific types of garments or finishes. This detailed archaeological evidence forces a rather profound and practical question. How did these ancient laundry workers manage such effective, large-scale cleaning without a single bottle of synthetic detergent, industrial bleach, or washing machine? Their success was a masterclass in resourcefulness and a deep, empirical understanding of chemistry. They turned a ubiquitous waste product, urine, into a valuable commodity, creating a recycling system that was both efficient and free. They identified and utilized the natural cleansing properties of specific clays and minerals. The entire operation was powered by human labor and hydraulics, using a clever system of vats and water channels to move the laundry through its various stages. The fuller's profession, therefore, stands as a powerful reminder that advanced technology is not always about invention, but often about the intelligent application of available resources. Their large wooden press was the final piece in a sophisticated system that transformed dirty, stained cloth into a symbol of civilization itself, highlighting the gritty, ingenious, and utterly essential complexities that underpinned daily life in the ancient world. The hum of the Roman laundry and the rhythmic stomp of the fullo fade away, replaced now by a far more delicate and meticulous sound, the gentle, rhythmic click-clack of an intricate wooden loom in ancient China. This was the engine of one of history's most legendary industries, a complex machine operated with breathtaking skill, most often by women whose expertise transformed the cocoon of a tiny moth into a fabric so coveted it would build empires and forge connections across the known world. The silk weaver's loom was more than just a tool. It was the final, masterful stage in a long, sacred, and astonishingly precise process that began with the most fragile of threads. To understand its significance is to understand that the weaver was not merely a craftsperson, but the vital link in a chain that stretched from a mulberry grove in China to a patrician's villa in Rome, her loom humming at the very heart of the Silk Road. Long before a single thread could be tensioned on the loom, the weaver's work began with the careful, almost reverent cultivation of the raw material itself. This was the domain of sericulture, a practice so guarded by ancient China that its secrets were protected by imperial decree for centuries on pain of death. The entire process hinged on the domestication of the Bomyx mori silkworm, a creature entirely dependent on human care. The weavers and the farmers who supplied them would meticulously tend to mulberry trees, harvesting the fresh, tender leaves that were the sole food source for the hungry caterpillars. The silkworms were kept in controlled, indoor environments, where they were carefully monitored through their life cycle. After gorging themselves on leaves for weeks, a single worm would spin its cocoon from a continuous filament of raw silk that could stretch for nearly a kilometer in length. The skill lay in the harvesting. To obtain this filament unbroken, the cocoons were gently steamed or baked to prevent the moth from emerging and breaking the thread, then placed in warm water to loosen the sericin, the natural gum holding the cocoon together. The weaver or her assistant would then use a simple tool to find the end of this impossibly fine filament, and carefully reel it onto a spindle. It could take thousands of cocoons to produce just a single pound of raw silk, a statistic that alone speaks to the monumental effort behind every shimmering length of cloth. The loom itself was the stage where this raw potential was transformed into breathtaking reality. While simple looms existed for basic tabby weaves, the true masterpieces of Chinese silk were created on far more sophisticated machinery. The most significant innovation was the drawloom, a formidable apparatus that represented the pinnacle of ancient textile technology. This loom was essentially an early form of programmable machine. It featured a complex overhead mechanism of cords and leashes, each connected to a specific warp thread. An assistant, often a young boy, would sit atop the loom in a space called the tower, and following the precise instructions of the master weaver below, would pull these cords in a specific sequence. This action would raise particular groups of warp threads, creating a shed or opening through which the weaver could pass the shuttle carrying the weft thread. This ingenious division of labor allowed for the creation of immensely complex and repetitive patterns, mythical beasts, intricate florals, and elaborate geometric designs that would have been impossible on a simpler loom. The drawloom was a testament to human ingenuity, a machine that translated a conceptual pattern into a tangible, woven reality with flawless precision. The patterns that emerged from these looms were not merely decorative, they were a language of power, status, and belief. The weaver was proficient in a range of techniques that produced distinct textiles, each with its own name and purpose. Brocade, known as jin in China, was the king of silks, woven with a weft-faced technique that often incorporated gold and silver threads. Brocade created a heavy, raised pattern that was reversible and dazzlingly luxurious, reserved for imperial robes and the most significant diplomatic gifts. Damask, while also patterned, was subtler. It relied on a single color of thread but used a specific weave structure to create a contrast between glossy and matte surfaces, making the pattern visible only as it caught the light. This created an elegant, shimmering effect prized for court garments and furnishings. Then there was gauze, a feat of technical prowess involving a complex twisting of warp threads to create an ethereal, translucent fabric that seemed to float. The skill required to maintain the even tension on these delicate twisted warps was extraordinary, a mark of a true weaving virtuoso. The proof of their supreme artistry lies not in texts, but in the fragile fragments that have survived the millennia. Along the various branches of the Silk Road, archaeologists have unearthed swatches of silk preserved in the dry desert air of Xinjiang or buried in the tombs of those who traded them. These fragments tell a vivid story. A piece of Han Dynasty polychrome brocade found in a desert outpost might feature stylized clouds and mythical animals, its colors still vibrant after 2,000 years. A Tang Dynasty samite woven with roundels containing confronting lions speaks of Persian influence, evidence of the cultural exchange the fabric itself facilitated. Each surviving scrap is a direct physical connection to the weaver's hand, a testament to the consistency of her tension, the clarity of her pattern, and the brilliance of her dyes, often derived from minerals like cinnabar for red and plants like indigo for blue. This incredible output, however, was never intended to remain within China's borders. It was a tool of statecraft and an engine of commerce. Historical texts, like the accounts of later historians Sima Qian and Ban Gu, detail how Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty used vast quantities of silk to buy off nomadic Qiongnu tribes to secure his borders and to pay his armies and officials. But its most famous role was as the ultimate luxury good that fueled transcontinental trade. Caravan by camel, bale by precious bale, silk began its long journey west. It moved along networks of routes through Central Asia, across the mountains and deserts of Persia, and into the marketplaces of the Roman Empire. In Rome, the demand for this mysterious, lustrous fabric became an obsession. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder lamented the vast sums of gold and silver that flowed east to pay for it, a drain on the imperial treasury, all for a clothing material so fine it was said to be as weightless as air. The Chinese weaver sitting at her loom was thus an unwitting global economic force. Her skill set in motion a flow of goods, ideas, and wealth that would shape the destinies of nations, making her loom one of the most influential tools in human history. From the vibrant, clattering looms of China, we now journey to the stark and windswept landscapes of the Viking North, where our next tool speaks not in color or thread, but in the stark, permanent language of stone and wood. Picture a heavy iron chisel, its tip hardened and sharpened to a fine edge, gripped in the calloused hand of a rune master. This was no common stonemason's tool. It was an instrument of immense power and responsibility, used to carve the angular symbols of the runic alphabet into unyielding surfaces. The individual who wielded it, the rune master, was a figure of profound respect, a rare literate professional in an oral culture whose work seamlessly wove together the practical, the memorial, and the deeply mystical. To carve runes was not merely to write, it was to activate a force, to cast a spell, to permanently etch a piece of one's soul and intention into the fabric of the world. This profession existed in a space where the act of writing was itself a form of magic, and the chisel was the wand that made it manifest. The very essence of the runes was believed to be magical. The word rune itself, from the Old Norse run, means secret or mystery. According to Norse mythology, the chief god Odin discovered the runes through a shamanistic act of self-sacrifice, hanging himself from the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, in order to gain this hidden knowledge. This origin story imbued the runes with a divine and fearsome power. They were not just letters. Each individual character or stave was believed to be a vessel of specific cosmic energy. A rune master's skill, therefore, went far beyond simple literacy. He was a master of this esoteric system, knowing which runes to combine to create a protective charm on an amulet, to bless a weapon with victory, to heal a sickness, or to curse an enemy. An inscription was never neutral. The act of carving was an invocation, and the finished runes held an active, potent energy that continued to work in the world long after the rune master had put down his tools. This belief meant his services were sought for the most critical moments of life and death, making him a central, if enigmatic, figure in his community. The physical act of rune cutting was a brutal test of skill and endurance, a stark contrast to the delicate work of a scribe with a reed pen. The materials chosen were as permanent as the messages they carried: great, glacial boulders for monumental works, or hardwoods like oak and yew for smaller, portable items. The rune master's toolkit was simple but effective. Alongside his heavy iron chisel, he would use a sturdy hammer, often made of iron or a heavy stone, to drive the point into the rock. For preliminary work, he might sketch the intended inscription with red ochre or charcoal, but the final execution was a feat of muscle memory and unwavering confidence. Each stroke had to be precise. A mistake on a granite surface could not be easily erased. The distinctive angular shape of the runes, with no horizontal lines, only verticals and diagonals, was a direct result of this medium. Curves are incredibly difficult to carve across the grain of wood or into stone, so the alphabet evolved into a series of straight, clear cuts that could be made efficiently with a chisel and mallet. The rune master's arm was his press, his chisel his type, and the stone his immutable parchment. The most famous and enduring examples of their work are the great runestones that still dot the Scandinavian countryside, acting as silent sentinels from the Viking Age. These were not grave markers in the modern sense, but proud, public announcements commissioned by wealthy families. Their inscriptions followed a fairly standard formula, but within that structure lies a world of human emotion and history. A typical stone might read, "Gunnar raised this stone in memory of Bjorn, his brother, a very good valiant man. He died in the West." These brief lines speak volumes about the culture, the importance of family honor, the pride in a relative's bravery, and the widespread reach of Viking explorers who died as far away as the British Isles. The rune master was the man tasked with translating this familial grief and pride into a permanent, public memorial, ensuring the deceased's name and reputation would not be forgotten. The supreme example of this practice, and one of the most important historical documents in Denmark, is the Jelling Stone, commissioned by King Harald Bluetooth in the 10th century. This massive runestone is often called Denmark's birth certificate. Its inscription is a masterpiece of political messaging and religious conversion, expertly carved by a royal rune master. It proudly declares, "King Haraldr ordered this monument made in memory of Gromer, his father, and in memory of Theodve, his mother, that Haraldr who won for himself all of Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian." Here, the rune master's chisel was used not just for memory but for proclamation. It celebrates military conquest, establishes a royal lineage, and marks the official conversion of an entire nation to Christianity, all in a few expertly carved lines. The stone is even adorned with one of the earliest known depictions of Christ in Scandinavia, intricately intertwined with Norse animal ornamentation, showing the fascinating cultural fusion happening at the highest levels of society. This one monument transforms the rune master from a local craftsman into a propagandist for the crown, his work essential for cementing a king's legacy and unifying a people under a new faith. Beyond these grand royal monuments, runes permeated everyday Viking life in more intimate ways, and the rune master's services were needed for these tasks as well. A small wooden stick found in Bergen, Norway, carries a playful message, "Jai, that says you should go home." This simple, personal note, carved over 900 years ago, reveals the use of runes for casual communication. Other finds are more dramatic. A piece of bone from Sigtuna, Sweden, is inscribed with the powerful words, "I carve cure runes," followed by a list of protective runes, clearly the work of a healer. And perhaps most chillingly, a runestone from Björketorp in Sweden bears a terrifying curse, "I foresee perdition for the one who breaks this monument. Treacherous death to him who shatters this, I prophesy destruction." This inscription shows the dark side of the rune master's power, his ability to use his craft to ward off vandals with the threat of supernatural retribution. From the grand to the mundane, from the sacred to the profane, the rune master's chisel gave voice to every aspect of the human experience, carving a unique and permanent record of a world poised between its pagan past and its Christian future. Yet the embalmer's hook, for all its visceral impact, was merely one instrument in a vast and meticulously organized toolkit, each item serving a purpose that was as much about ritual purity as it was about physical procedure. The Wetty's workshop was a sacred space, a blend of an operating theater and a chapel, where every action was governed by religious protocol. Alongside the brain hook were a suite of other specialized implements. A sharp obsidian or bronze knife, known as the Pesesh Kef, was used in the opening of the mouth ceremony, a crucial ritual performed on the mummy just before burial to restore its senses for the afterlife. Other blades, often with curved edges, were employed for the primary incision, typically made on the left side of the abdomen. This cut was not made haphazardly. Its location and the tool used were prescribed by tradition, and the priest making it would often then ritually flee from the scene, with other priests throwing stones at him, symbolically punishing him for the necessary act of desecrating the body. This complex dance of action and atonement highlights the profound tension at the heart of the embalmer's work. The sacred duty to preserve the body required them to first violate it, a paradox that demanded elaborate spiritual remediation. The process itself, as detailed by the Greek historian Herodotus, who witnessed it in the 5th century before the Common Era, was a marathon of meticulous care that could last up to 70 days. It began not with a knife but with a prayer and a symbolic payment to the gods. The body was first purified with water from the Nile and palm wine, then transported to the Ibu, the tent of purification. From there, it was moved to the Waybet, the place of embalming. The actual physical preservation was a multi-stage marvel of ancient chemistry. After the internal organs were removed through the abdominal incision, all except the heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and identity, the body cavity was thoroughly cleansed. Then began the dehydration process. The embalmers packed the body inside and out with natron, a naturally occurring salt compound harvested from dry lake beds. This was not table salt, but a specific blend of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate that acted as a powerful desiccant, drawing all moisture out of the tissues and preventing decomposition. The body would lie covered in this salt for 40 days, a period of transformation where the physical vessel was slowly prepared for its eternal journey. The fate of the removed organs introduces another iconic set of tools, the canopic jars. These were not simple storage containers but exquisite works of art, often made from calcite, pottery, or wood, each one under the protection of a specific son of the god Horus. The liver was placed in a jar topped with the human-headed Imseti, the lungs went to the baboon-headed Hapi, the stomach was guarded by the jackal-headed Duamutef, and the intestines were entrusted to the falcon-headed Kebesenuf. The careful, ritualistic preservation of these organs speaks to the Egyptian belief that the deceased would need their entire physical form, intact and functional, in the afterlife. The brain, however, was accorded a different fate. As it was not understood to have any function, it was liquefied with the hook and drained out through the nose, then unceremoniously discarded. This distinction reveals a fascinating anatomical hierarchy in their spiritual world view. The heart was essential, the organs were protected, but the brain was merely disposable matter, a stark contrast to our modern understanding of its central role. The final stages of the process were where the body was literally reconstituted and recreated for eternity. After the 40 days in natron, the desiccated, shrunken body was brought out, its skin darkened and leathery. The embalmers then worked to restore its lifelike appearance. They packed the empty body cavity with linens soaked in resins, sawdust, and aromatic spices like myrrh and cinnamon to plump out the form. The skin was anointed with sacred oils and resins, which not only perfumed the body but also formed a waterproof seal, acting as a final barrier against decay. Then began the incredibly intricate and ritualized wrapping. Hundreds of yards of fine linen strips were used, each layer accompanied by specific incantations and prayers. Amulets and jewels were placed between the layers at specific points on the body, a scarab over the heart, wedjat eyes for protection, and other charms to guide and defend the soul in the underworld. This wrapping was not a mere bundling. It was a form of spiritual armor, a final, sacred cocoon that transformed the physical remains into an eternal, divine statue known as the Sa, the imperishable body. The ultimate testament to the embalmer's success lies in the mummies that have survived, defying time itself. The most famous example is the boy King Tutankhamun. When his tomb was opened, his mummy, though damaged by the overzealous application of resins that had carbonized, was still largely intact, his iconic golden mask preserving his features for the world to see. Even more extraordinary are the so-called caches of royal mummies, such as those found at Deir el-Bahari. Here, the mummies of some of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, like Ramesses the Great, were hidden by priests in ancient times to protect them from tomb robbers. When these were examined by modern scientists, they could still see the work of the ancient embalmers, the careful packing, the precise incisions, the linen wrappings, and even the floral garlands placed around the necks of the kings. These are not macabre curiosities. They are direct physical evidence of a promise kept across millennia. They are the finished product of the Weti's sacred craft, a testament to a profession that viewed death not as an end, but as a transition to be managed with the utmost skill, reverence, and a profound belief in the power of preservation to conquer oblivion. Now picture the rhythmic, percussive clang of a different kind of hammer, not one beating papyrus or shaping a plowshare, but one pounding against red-hot steel on an anvil, echoing from a workshop nestled in the shadow of a Roman amphitheater. This is the hammer of the gladiator armorer, a tool that forged the very essence of the arena's deadly theater. The man who wielded it was a master of paradox, an artisan whose craft existed at the violent intersection of survival and spectacle, engineering both protection and performance in equal measure. His profession demanded a unique fusion of skills: the metallurgist's understanding of iron and bronze, the anatomist's knowledge of the human body's vulnerable points, and the showman's flair for the dramatic. He didn't just make armor, he crafted a character, a visual icon that the roaring crowd could instantly recognize from the highest seats. Every helmet, every greave, every curved shield that left his workshop was a carefully balanced piece of equipment, designed to defend a life while simultaneously ensuring the bloodshed continued in the most visually thrilling way possible. The armorer's most crucial partnership was not with the gladiator himself, but with the Lannister, the manager and owner of the gladiatorial troupe. The Lannister was a businessman, and his gladiators were his valuable assets, each representing a significant investment in training, food, and medical care. It was in his direct financial interest to keep them alive and fighting for as long as possible. Therefore, he worked hand in glove with the armorer, commissioning gear that provided maximum protection for the most vital areas. The armorer's deep understanding of anatomy was his greatest asset here. He knew exactly where to place the thickest plates of steel to protect the arteries in the neck and thighs, the collarbone, and the heart. He designed helmets with broad neck guards and reinforcing ridges to deflect downward blows aimed at the skull and vertebrae. This was not about creating an impervious tank. It was about strategic defense, leaving certain less lethal areas, like the heavily muscled back or the padded arm, exposed to allow for the possibility of a superficial, blood-drawing wound that would satisfy the crowd without ending the match or the investment. This intricate dance between safety and spectacle is perfectly illustrated by the distinct armor designed for different gladiator classes, each one a specialized combat role with its own prescribed equipment. Consider the contrast between the Murmillo and the Rosciarius. The Murmillo was the heavily armed fisherman, named for the sea creature on his helmet crest. His armor was all about robust, full coverage. His most defining piece was the massive, full-faced helmet with its broad, flat brim and high crest, a piece that offered superb protection but also limited peripheral vision and was notoriously stuffy and disorienting in the heat of combat. He carried a large, rectangular shield and wore a heavy greave on his left leg, his sword arm often left unprotected to allow for mobility. His opponent, the Rosciarius, was his polar opposite, the light, agile net fighter. His armor was minimal by design, a shoulder guard, the gallerus, on his left side, which was often elaborately sculpted into the shape of a sea creature or a gorgon's head. This piece was ingeniously designed to protect his head and neck when he raised his left arm to throw his net, while also serving as a dramatic, recognizable silhouette. His near nudity heightened the drama, making him seem both vulnerable and audaciously skillful, a stark visual contrast to his heavily armored foe that instantly communicated the narrative of their battle to the audience. The decoration of this gear was far from frivolous. It was a critical part of the armorer's brief. Engraved scenes of gods and victories, embossed floral patterns, and polished brass accents weren't just for show, they were branding. In the vast, open-air amphitheaters, where a spectator in the top row was hundreds of feet away, these gleaming, recognizable symbols were essential for identifying the combatants and their stories. A gladiator's helmet was his face, his mask of terror and fame. The armorer's hammer and chasing tools were used to create these elaborate designs, transforming a functional piece of equipment into a piece of storytelling propaganda. The functionality, however, was never sacrificed. The broad brim of a helmet wasn't just a canvas for decoration. It was a reinforced ledge designed to catch and divert sword blows away from the face. The thickness of a shield's boss wasn't just a shape. It was calculated to absorb the impact of a trident strike. The armorer's genius lay in seamlessly integrating these two demands, making the functional dramatic and the dramatic functional. Perhaps the most vivid window into this world comes once again from the ash-preserved ruins of Pompeii. Just a few blocks from the city's amphitheater, archaeologists have uncovered what they believe to be a gladiator barracks, complete with its attached armory. Within, they found a treasure trove that brings the profession to life: the carbonized remains of wooden chests that once held the gladiator's gear, and most importantly, over a dozen pieces of actual gladiator armor. This wasn't just a few fragments, it was a complete ensemble. They discovered heavy bronze helmets with their intricate grills and decorative scenes, the metal still bearing the dents and scratches from its final fights. They found greaves shaped to the calf muscle and the remains of a shoulder guard. This incredible find provides tangible proof of the armorer's craft: the thickness of the metal, the quality of the decoration, and the evidence of repair. We can see where a dent was hammered out, where a broken strap was replaced. This was not a disposable kit. It was valuable, maintained equipment, cared for by the armorer to ensure his clients, the Lannisters' investment, was protected. This delicate balance forces a profound question about the nature of the games themselves. How did these master craftsmen reconcile their undeniable skill and artistry with the grim purpose of their work? Their beautifully made helmets were designed to protect a man's head so he could continue to fight, not so he could walk away free. Their brilliantly engineered shields were meant to block attacks, prolonging the combat for the entertainment of the masses. The armorer's hammer, therefore, becomes a powerful symbol of the complex, brutal economy of the arena. It was a tool that sustained life just enough to feed death as a public spectacle. The armorer was not a murderer. He was a technician, an artist, and a businessman, operating within a system that demanded his skills to function. His legacy is a chilling reminder of how easily human ingenuity can be channeled into the machinery of violence, and how the lines between art, sport, and brutality were, in the roar of the Roman crowd, permanently and tragically blurred. Leaving behind the dramatic spectacle of the Roman arena, we now travel thousands of years earlier and thousands of miles to the east, to the sprawling, meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley civilization. Here, amidst the world's first urban sanitation systems and standardized brickwork, we find a tool whose gentle, rhythmic hum was the soundtrack to daily survival: the potter's wheel. This was not the complex kick wheel of a medieval European workshop, but a beautifully simple, heavy terracotta or stone disc known as a chakar, mounted on a central wooden axle. The potter would set this disc spinning with one hand while using the other to coax form from a centered lump of clay, a practice that revolutionized production in one of the ancient world's most advanced societies. The individual who mastered this wheel was not a solitary artist but a vital economic cog, an artisan whose output fed the city, stored its surplus, and connected it to a vast network of trade that stretched from the mountains of Afghanistan to the shores of Mesopotamia. The true ingenuity of the Indus Valley potter is revealed not just in the wheel itself, but in the entire sophisticated system of production that surrounded it. Before a single vessel could be thrown, the potter had to be a master of his raw materials. He would source specific clay deposits from riverbanks, knowing which ones had the right plasticity and mineral content. This clay was then meticulously processed, cleaned of pebbles and organic matter, soaked in pits to achieve the perfect consistency, and often tempered with additives like fine sand, crushed straw, or even crushed pottery grog. This tempering was a critical piece of ancient materials science. It prevented the clay from shrinking and cracking during drying and firing, and it altered the vessel's porosity, making it more suitable for its intended use. A pot designed to slowly evaporate water and cool its contents would have a different recipe than a sturdy storage jar meant to hold grain. This conscious engineering of the clay body shows a profound, empirical understanding of the properties of their materials, ensuring that every pot, from the most humble bowl to the most elaborate jar, was perfectly fit for its purpose. Once the clay was prepared, the potter's wheel allowed for a leap in productivity and standardization that is a hallmark of the entire Indus Valley culture. The ability to throw pots rapidly and with consistent thickness was a game-changer. Archaeologists can identify the telltale signs of wheel-thrown pottery in the concentric rings left on the interior of the vessels, a signature of mass production that contrasts with the slower, coiler and beater method used for larger storage jars. This efficiency was essential for a civilization that may have supported over 5 million people at its peak. The potter's workshop would have been a hub of activity, with teams likely specializing in different tasks, one person preparing the clay, another throwing the forms, and others handling the decoration and firing. The output was staggering, supplying every household in cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa with the essential wares for cooking, serving, eating, and storage. The potter's wheel, therefore, was not just a tool for making art. It was an early industrial machine that helped fuel the growth and stability of one of the world's first great urban experiments. The artistic expression of these potters, however, is what makes their work instantly recognizable and deeply captivating. While much of their output was utilitarian and undecorated, a significant portion was treated with a brilliant red slip and then painted with elegant, black designs using a fine-haired brush. The motifs are a window into their aesthetic world, intersecting circles, intricate peacock feathers, lush pipal leaves, and a menagerie of animals including fish, bulls, and the enigmatic unicorn-like creature that appears on so many Indus seals. This was not random doodling, it was a sophisticated visual language. The precision of the brushwork, the balance of the compositions, and the recurring symbols suggest these designs may have held cultural or even ritual significance, transforming a simple vessel into something more than just a container. The famous perforated pottery, with its meticulously drilled holes, is another masterpiece of technical skill. These were not colanders for food, but likely braziers or incense burners, designed to allow airflow while containing the embers, their complex patterns showcasing a willingness to invest immense effort into both beauty and function. The final and most dramatic stage of the potter's craft was the firing. The Indus Valley kiln was a marvel of pyrotechnic engineering, a clear precursor to the closed furnaces that would follow. Unlike open bonfires, which are unpredictable and sooty, these were sophisticated, double-chambered updraft kilns. The firing chamber, where the pots were carefully stacked, was situated above a combustion chamber. A fire lit in the lower chamber would have its heat and hot gases drawn upwards through flues, enveloping the pottery in a consistent, controlled temperature that could reach well over 800 degrees Celsius. This design allowed the potter to achieve two crucial things. Firstly, a fully oxidized firing environment that turned the iron-rich clay a consistent and beautiful brick red color throughout. And secondly, the high temperatures needed to vitrify the clay, making it strong and durable enough to survive millennia in the ground. The potter's role as a master of fire was the final alchemical step that transformed vulnerable, sun-dried mud into ceramic, one of humanity's first truly synthetic materials. The legacy of the Indus Valley potter extends far beyond the walls of their cities, carried on the hulls of ships sailing the Arabian Sea. Their distinctive black on red ware, particularly a style known as Indus black slipware, has been found in ancient sites across Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. At the Sumerian city of Ur, for instance, fragments of Indus pottery have been unearthed, evidence of a thriving long-distance trade. This means the humble potter, working at his wheel in a city like Lothal, which had its own dedicated dockyard, was indirectly connected to a globalizing economy. His pots, perhaps filled with cotton textiles, precious woods, or carnelian beads, were a traded commodity in their own right, the packaging for other goods, and even the ballast for ships. The standardized sizes and shapes of Harappan pottery, from the tall, pointed base jars perfect for stable transport on a ship to the small, delicate offering cups, speak to an economy built on precision and volume. These countless recovered shards and complete vessels now serve as silent informants for archaeologists, providing clues that go far beyond mere art history. The soot patterns on the outside of a cooking pot can be analyzed through gas chromatography to reveal the types of oils and foods that were once prepared in it, telling us about the ancient Indus diet. The residue inside a small, narrow-necked jar might contain traces of wine or a fermented beverage, hinting at social and ritual practices. The very distribution of different pottery styles across the vast Indus region helps scholars map out cultural zones and trade routes. The potter's wheel, therefore, produced more than just household items. It created the primary data set we have for understanding the daily life, economy, and culinary habits of an entire civilization that left behind no deciphered written records. Their tool represents a profession that was the ultimate fusion of the practical and the beautiful, a daily act of creation that fed the body, organized the economy, and expressed the soul of a lost and magnificent world. Yet while gladiators clashed in the arena and potters shaped the clay of daily life, another, quieter revolution was unfolding in the shaded groves and colonnaded walkways of Athens. Here, the most powerful tool was not made of iron or stone, but of wood and wax. Picture the Greek philosopher's tablet, a simple, hinged pair of wooden frames, their recessed surfaces filled with a dark layer of beeswax, often carried with a pointed bronze or ivory stylus. This unassuming object was the portable, reusable mind of the intellectual, the instrument that enabled the very birth of Western philosophy and science. In the hands of a thinker like Plato or Aristotle, this tablet was not merely a notepad. It was a laboratory for thought, a dynamic space where ideas could be sketched, tested, argued against, and erased in an endless cycle of refinement. The ability to capture a fleeting thought in wax before it vanished, to diagram a logical argument, or to work through a complex geometric proof step by step was a cognitive leap on par with the invention of the printing press. It externalized thought, allowing for a new kind of critical analysis that was systematic, visual, and iterative. The physical design of the tablet was a masterpiece of pragmatic innovation, perfectly suited to the life of a scholar and teacher. The wax filling, typically a mix of beeswax and a pigment like lampblack for better contrast, was the key to its genius. Unlike ink on precious papyrus, which was permanent and costly, wax was endlessly forgiving. The flat end of the stylus could be used to smooth over a mistake or an outdated idea, literally wiping the slate clean for a new line of inquiry. This feature encouraged intellectual bravery. A philosopher could draft a radical hypothesis or a counterargument without the fear of wasting expensive materials or being permanently associated with a failed idea. Tablets could be small and personal for private musings or larger for use in a lecture setting. Some were even made as polyptychs with multiple hinged leaves, creating an early form of a multi-page notebook that could organize different topics or arguments. The stylus itself, with its sharp point for writing and its flat end for erasing, was a perfectly balanced tool for this dance of creation and revision, a physical metaphor for the philosophical process itself, constantly questioning, refining, and starting anew. We can see these tools in action, frozen in time, through the art that has survived from the ancient world. A famous Roman marble relief, itself a copy of a lost Greek original, depicts a philosopher seated in a thoughtful pose, holding an open wax tablet on his knee, his stylus poised as if momentarily struck by a new insight. These depictions are not merely artistic conventions, they are testaments to the tablet's ubiquity as the signature instrument of the intellectual class. Within the schools they founded, like Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum, these tablets were the essential technology of pedagogy. A teacher could use a large tablet to diagram a concept for his students, who would likely be following along on their own. During the famous Socratic dialogues, a listener might quickly jot down a particularly compelling line of questioning or a definition that was being proposed, not to memorize it verbatim, but to engage with it critically later. The tablet facilitated the dialectical method, the back and forth clash of thesis and antithesis, by allowing ideas to be visually represented, deconstructed, and synthesized in real time. The impact of this simple technology on the development of specific fields was profound. In rhetoric, a student could use the wax to outline the structure of a speech, arranging his arguments and rhetorical flourishes before committing the final version to papyrus. In mathematics and geometry, the tablet was indispensable. Euclid's entire system of geometry, with its complex proofs and precise diagrams, was almost certainly worked out in wax long before it was inked into a formal textbook. The ability to draw a circle with a compass, measure an angle, and then erase and adjust the lines was fundamental to the process of discovery. The wax surface held these geometric shapes temporarily, allowing for spatial reasoning and manipulation that would be impossible with words alone. This tactile, visual engagement with abstract concepts fostered a new mode of thinking that was logical, evidence-based, and systematic, the very bedrock of the scientific method. The legacy of the philosopher's wax tablet extends far beyond the ancient world, its spirit echoing in every modern tool we use for non-permanent, exploratory thought. The whiteboard covered in equations, the digital tablet with its note-taking app, the chalkboard in a classroom, all are direct descendants of that wooden-framed wax surface. Its true invention was not the tablet itself, but the cognitive space it created, a temporary, malleable, and private arena for the mind to wrestle with uncertainty. It gave thinkers permission to be wrong, to experiment, and to follow a line of reasoning to its absurd end without consequence. This freedom to explore and erase was arguably as important to the birth of critical thinking as the ideas themselves. It taught a generation of philosophers that knowledge was not a fixed set of doctrines to be memorized, but a living, evolving process of questioning, testing, and understanding. The humble wax tablet, therefore, stands as one of history's most powerful enablers of thought, a quiet tool that helped humanity learn how to think. Yet as we leave behind the quiet contemplation of the Greek scholar, we are abruptly transported to a world of intense, shimmering heat and divine ambition, deep within the heart of the Aztec Empire. The tool awaiting us here is one of transformative fire, the ceramic crucible of the Aztec goldsmith, the revered Tolteca. In the hands of these master artisans, this humble clay vessel became an alchemical womb, the final stage in a sacred process that turned earthly metal into the sweat of the sun, the tears of the gods gold fit for deities and emperors. The Tolteca occupied a hallowed place in Aztec society. Their title itself harkened back to the legendary Toltec people, who were remembered as the supreme artists and wise ones of a golden age. To be a goldsmith was to wield a fragment of that divine creativity, a power that required not only immense technical skill but also profound spiritual devotion. Their workshops were spaces of both meticulous craftsmanship and ritual purity, for the objects they created were not mere adornments but potent conduits of sacred energy, destined for the altars of gods or the regalia of the Tlatoni, the speaker and emperor himself. The journey to a finished masterpiece began not with metal, but with something fragile and ephemeral, beeswax. The first and most creative stage was the modeling of the wax prototype. A Tolteca would warm the wax in his hands, softening it until it was pliable, and then with deft fingers and simple pointed tools, he would sculpt the most intricate forms imaginable. He might create a delicate pendant in the shape of a hummingbird, its wings perfectly thin and detailed, or a fearsome mask of the god Tezcatlipoca, with its signature mirror of obsidian. This was where the artist's vision was fully expressed, a stage limited only by his imagination and skill. The wax model was a positive form, a perfect replica of the desired final object. To it, the smith would carefully attach wax rods, which would later serve as channels for the molten metal to flow in and for air to escape. Once complete, this delicate wax sculpture was ready for its own transformation, a process of encapsulation that would both preserve and destroy its form. This wax model was then subjected to a process of entombment. It was carefully invested or enclosed within a thick, liquid clay slurry that was packed around it, enveloping every minute detail of the sculpted wax. This mold was typically built up in 2 or more parts to allow it to be opened later, and a small opening was left to create a pouring cup. Once the clay had dried and hardened to a ceramic-like consistency, the entire assembly was turned upside down and placed in a fire. This was the moment of truth and the source of the technique's name, the lost wax process. The heat of the fire would melt the wax entirely, causing it to run out of the now hardened clay mold through the channels, leaving behind a perfect, hollow, negative cavity in the exact shape of the original wax sculpture. All that remained was an empty tomb of baked clay, holding within it a void in the shape of a masterpiece. Now the crucible, our central tool, took center stage. This was a stout, deep ceramic cup designed to withstand extreme thermal shock. Into it, the goldsmith would place pieces of raw gold, often in the form of dust harvested from river places or small nuggets from traded ingots. Using a long blowpipe, often made of reed or fired clay, the smith or an assistant would gently but consistently blow air into a charcoal fire, heating the crucible. This technique, far more precise than simple bellows, allowed the artisan to direct a concentrated stream of oxygen onto the fuel, raising the temperature high enough to achieve the phenomenally high melting point of gold, over 1000 degrees Celsius. They would watch for the telltale shimmering, liquid surface that signaled the metal was ready, its molten state resembling liquid sunlight. In a breathtakingly swift and precise motion, the smith would then use tongs to lift the searing hot crucible and pour its glowing contents directly into the waiting clay mold, filling the negative space left by the vanished wax. After an agonizing wait for the metal to cool and solidify, the mold was broken open with a hammer. Inside lay the rough casting, a golden object now bearing the sprues and channels of its birth. These were carefully filed away, and the piece entered its final stage of finishing. The Tolteca would polish the gold with fine abrasives like sand or powdered reed, burnish it to a high shine with a smooth stone, and often augment it with inlays of turquoise, jade, or shell, creating a dazzling contrast of color and texture. The finished piece was a testament to a process that was both destruction and creation. The wax model was forever lost, sacrificed to create something eternal and magnificent. The Spanish conquistadors who arrived in the early 16th century were utterly astounded by the results of this craft. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a soldier in Cortés's army, famously wrote of the treasures in Moctezuma's zoo, describing aviaries crafted of gold and silver, and of the gifts presented to them, wheels of gold and silver as big as the wheels of a cart, and many other articles of gold and silver in the form of birds and animals. These were not primitive trinkets, they were the products of a sophisticated artistic tradition that rivaled anything in Renaissance Europe. Another chronicler, Father Bernardino de Sahagun, working with indigenous informants, recorded detailed descriptions of the goldsmiths' techniques and the breathtaking items they produced for ritual use. These accounts provide a heartbreakingly vivid picture of an artistic zenith that the Spaniards themselves were about to systematically destroy. This leads us to the great, unanswerable tragedy of the Tolteca's art. The very beauty of their work, the sheer volume of gold they produced, sealed its fate. For the Spanish, these objects were not sacred art, they were raw currency, a means to fund their conquest and enrich their king. In a frenzy of greed, they systematically looted temples and palaces, piling exquisite works of art into immense mounds. These masterpieces, delicate earrings, intricate pectorals, masks of gods, and sculptures of animals, were then unceremoniously melted down in their own crucibles into bland, standardized gold bars for easier transport back to Spain. The artistic value, the cultural significance, the centuries of perfected technique embodied in each piece, all of it was annihilated in the fires of avarice. The few pieces that survived, often because they were hidden away or sent to Europe as curiosities before being melted, are mere ghosts of what was lost. A small, shimmering gold frog in a museum case or a simple bell cast in the shape of a human head are all that remain to hint at the grandeur of a lost artistic universe. The lost wax crucible of the Aztec goldsmith thus becomes a powerful symbol of creation and destruction, of beauty born from fire and then consumed by it. It represents a profession that viewed its materials as sacred and its purpose as divine, a stark contrast to the conquerors who saw only monetary value. The few surviving artifacts force us to ask what was lost not just in terms of objects, but in terms of human knowledge and spiritual expression. What myths were illustrated in those melted sculptures? What prayers were encoded in those intricate designs? The Tolteca's crucible held more than molten metal. It held the captured light of a civilization's highest artistic aspirations, a light that was brutally and permanently extinguished, leaving behind only the faintest golden glimmer and an enduring question of what might have been. But to truly grasp the significance of the Illuminator's quill, we must first step into the hushed, disciplined environment where it was most often wielded, the scriptorium of a medieval monastery. This was not an artist's studio in the romantic sense. It was a sacred workshop, a place of intense devotion and physical labor, where the creation of a book was considered a form of prayer in itself. The Illuminator, often a monk who had taken a vow of silence, would spend his days in a carrel, a small desk set against a window to capture every precious minute of daylight. His world was one of meticulous routine, governed by the canonical hours of prayer that structured the monastic day. The work was slow, painstaking, and deeply spiritual. Each stroke of the pen was an act of piety, a deliberate effort to beautify the Word of God and preserve the knowledge of the ancient world and the Church Fathers. In an age before the printing press, these manuscripts were not merely books. They were the primary vessels of culture, faith, and learning, and the Illuminator was the guardian of this flame, ensuring that light would be passed on to future generations through the vibrant, living pages he created. The physical process of creating the canvas for this art was an arduous craft in itself. Long before a single drop of ink could be applied, the Illuminator's surface was parchment, or sometimes the finer vellum, made from the carefully prepared skin of calves, sheep, or goats. This was not simple paper. Its production was a complex, weeks-long process. The skin would be soaked in a lime solution to remove hair and flesh, then stretched taut on a wooden frame called a hearse, where it was scraped thin and smooth with a lunellum, a crescent-shaped knife. As it dried under tension, the skin would be continuously worked to achieve a uniform, flawless surface. The finished sheets were then cut to size and often grouped into quires, ready for the scribe to inscribe the text. Only after the words were written would the pages be passed to the Illuminator, who would begin his transformative work. He would first plan his design, often sketching a faint outline with a lead point or a fine brush dipped in dilute ink. This preparatory stage was crucial, a blueprint for the intricate symphony of color and gold that was to follow, ensuring that every element would harmonize with the sacred text it adorned. Then came the true magic, the creation of the colors. The Illuminator's palette was sourced directly from the natural world, and each pigment had its own unique origin story and preparation ritual. The most coveted color was a brilliant, deep ultramarine blue, derived from the precious lapis lazuli stone, which was mined in a single remote region of modern-day Afghanistan and traded across continents at a cost rivaling gold. The process to extract the color was incredibly laborious. The stones were ground into a fine powder, then mixed with wax and resins and kneaded through a lye solution, a process repeated multiple times to wash out the pure blue particles. For a vibrant vermilion red, they used cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide mineral that had to be ground with extreme care. Greens came from verdigris, the green rust that forms on copper, or from minerals like malachite. Yellows were sourced from saffron, ochre, or even arsenic-based orpiment. Each of these raw materials had to be painstakingly ground by hand on a stone slab using a glass or stone muller, then mixed with a binding medium like egg white glare or gum arabic to create the luminous paint that would adhere to the parchment. This intimate knowledge of chemistry and botany was an essential part of the Illuminator's expertise. The most dazzling technique in the Illuminator's repertoire, however, was the application of gold leaf, a process that truly made the manuscripts seem to glow with divine light. This was not a simple matter of gluing down a piece of metal. First, the Illuminator would prepare the area for gilding by applying a raised base, often made from a mixture of gypsum, chalk, or clay known as gesso. This malleable substance was built up to create a slightly three-dimensional surface, sometimes meticulously modeled with a tool to create tiny patterns in the gesso. Once this base was perfectly dry and hard, it was moistened with a sticky solution like garlic juice or wine. Then, using a specialized tool called a gilder's tip, a fine brush made of hair or feathers, the artist would lift the impossibly thin sheet of gold leaf and gently lay it onto the prepared tacky surface. After it was set, the excess gold was brushed away, and the leaf was burnished to a mirror-like shine with a smooth, hard stone, often a dog's tooth or a piece of hematite. This technique of raised and burnished gold gave the illumination a tangible texture and an incredible reflective quality, making the gold appear to shimmer and move as the reader turned the page in the candlelight, creating an effect of living, breathing sanctity. The symbolic language woven into these illuminations was a complex visual theology, a code that would have been readily understood by a medieval viewer. Every color, every creature, every flower held a deeper meaning. The lavish use of gold was not merely for show. It represented the divine light of heaven, the uncreated light of God Himself. The rich ultramarine blue of the Virgin Mary's robes symbolized her sanctity and her role as the Queen of Heaven. Red, the color of blood and fire, could represent the passion of Christ, martyrdom, or divine love. Even the seemingly decorative borders were filled with meaning. Woven amongst the intricate knotwork and acanthus leaves were often drolleries, whimsical, and sometimes bizarre, marginal figures of monkeys, rabbits, snails, or hybrid monsters. These were not mere doodles. Scholars debate their purpose, suggesting they could represent the chaos and sin of the world outside the sacred text, serve as moral lessons, or simply be a playful release valve for an artist working under immense pressure and discipline. To read an illuminated manuscript was to engage in a multi-layered dialogue with the divine, where beauty, faith, and learning were inextricably intertwined. The supreme testament to this entire sacred craft is the Book of Kells, an illuminated gospel book created around the year 800, likely on the island of Iona, and finished in Kells in Ireland. It is the masterpiece of insular art, a style unique to the monasteries of the British Isles. To turn its pages today is to be left breathless by the sheer ambition and minute detail of its decoration. The carpet pages are so dense with intricate, interwoven patterns that they seem to vibrate with energy. The Cairo page, which introduces the account of Christ's birth in the Gospel of Matthew, is a breathtaking explosion of spirals, trumpets, and tiny, intricate figures all swirling around the sacred monogram. The human figures, with their wide, staring eyes and stylized features, possess an otherworldly presence. The precision of the line work, achieved with a quill that likely had to be recut every few sentences, is almost superhuman. The book contains 10 full-page illustrations and countless decorated initials, each one a self-contained universe of symbolism and artistry. It represents the cumulative effort of perhaps 3 or 4 master illuminators working for years, a monumental investment of time, skill, and priceless materials, all dedicated to the glorification of a single text. This incredible achievement forces a practical and awe-inspiring question. In the dim, flickering light of a tallow candle or the weak northern sun filtering through a narrow window, how did these artists achieve such microscopic perfection and such breathtaking luminosity? The answer lies in a combination of supreme skill, adapted vision, and ingenious tool use. They likely used magnifying lenses made from polished rock crystal or glass spheres filled with water. They engineered their workspace to maximize available light, using white surfaces to reflect it onto their page. Their eyes became attuned to the subtle variations in their materials, and their hands, guided by years of disciplined practice, developed a muscle memory that allowed for flawless execution. The quill itself was a marvel of customization. The Illuminator would have constantly been recutting and reshaping its nib to achieve different line weights, from the hair-like strokes that defined a tiny angel's wing to the broad, confident sweeps that filled a background with color. The legacy of the medieval Illuminator is a powerful reminder that human artistry, fueled by devotion and supported by a deep understanding of material science, can overcome any technological limitation. Their finely cut quill did more than just decorate pages. It crafted windows into heaven, ensuring that knowledge and faith would not only be preserved but would shine forth with a beauty meant to elevate the human spirit toward the divine. Now let's set sail from the quiet scriptoria of medieval Europe and journey back more than 3,000 years to the sun-drenched shores of Bronze Age Crete. Here, the sound is not the scratch of a quill but the rhythmic, resonant thwack of wood on wood, the sound of a Minoan shipbuilder's adze biting into a seasoned timber. This tool, with its elegantly curved blade set at a right angle to its haft, was the cornerstone of a civilization built on waves. It was more than a simple woodworking implement. It was the instrument that carved out the very destiny of the Minoans, transforming them from an island people into the Mediterranean's first great maritime empire, the undisputed masters of the wine-dark sea. To understand the adze is to first understand the Minoan world itself. Crete is a large, fertile island, but its true wealth lay not just in its soil, but in its strategic position at the crossroads of three continents. To tap into the riches of Egypt, the Levant, and the Aegean, the Minoans needed to become sailors, and to become sailors, they first had to become the ancient world's most innovative shipwrights. The adze was the primary tool of this transformation. Unlike an axe which chops across the grain, the adze is pulled toward the user, allowing for a controlled, scooping action that is perfect for hollowing out logs for canoes or, more importantly, shaping the complex curves of a seagoing plank. With this tool, a master shipbuilder could perform 100 different tasks, felling a tall cypress tree, roughing out a plank, or performing the final, delicate shaping of a hull. It was the universal tool of their trade, an extension of their intimate knowledge of wood and water. The techniques these builders pioneered were nothing short of revolutionary. Their most significant innovation was a method known as shell-first construction. This stands in stark contrast to the frame-first method that would become common later in history. Instead of first building a skeleton of ribs and then attaching planking to it, the Minoans built their ships from the outside in. They would first lay the keel and then carefully fit the planks together edge to edge, using sophisticated joinery to create a strong, watertight shell. Once the shell of the hull was complete, the internal framing was added to provide additional strength and rigidity. This technique required an incredible eye for three-dimensional design. The shipwright had to hold the entire complex form of the finished vessel in his mind, knowing exactly how to shape each individual plank so that it would curve perfectly to form the hull. It was a holistic approach to shipbuilding, a testament to their advanced spatial reasoning and their deep, generational understanding of how a ship needed to move through the water. Securing this elegant wooden shell required another brilliant technique, lashing. Instead of using metal nails which could work loose and cause catastrophic leaks, the Minoans used miles of tough, flexible rope made from papyrus or esparto grass. They would drill precise holes along the edges of adjacent planks and then tightly lash them together with these ropes. This method created a hull that was remarkably flexible and strong. In heavy seas, a Minoan ship could actually flex and move with the waves, absorbing stresses that would shatter a more rigid, nailed-tight vessel. The lashings were then sealed with a mixture of beeswax and resin, making the hull watertight. This entire process, The careful drilling, the intricate lashing, the waterproofing was all made possible by the adze, which shaped the planks to such a precise fit that the lashings could hold them firm against the immense pressure of the sea. The choice of materials was equally critical to their success. The Minoans were not just master craftsmen, they were master foresters and logisticians. They understood the unique properties of different woods and sourced them from their extensive trade networks. For the keel and the critical central planks, they prized the tall, straight, and incredibly durable trunks of the cypress tree, which was resistant to rot and marine borers. For the internal framing, they might use a more flexible wood like oak, and for the all-important lashing ropes, they depended on imports, likely from Egypt, for the finest papyrus. This access to superior materials, combined with their unparalleled skill, allowed them to build vessels that were far larger and more seaworthy than anything that had come before. Some archaeological estimates, based on the size of stone anchors found and the scale of their trade, suggest that major Minoan ships could have reached up to 30 meters in length, capable of carrying not just dozens of crew and passengers, but also tons of cargo across hundreds of miles of open water. We can vividly see the proud results of their labor not in a preserved shipwreck, but in the beautiful art they left behind. The magnificent frescoes from the town of Akrotiri on Thera, a Minoan settlement preserved by a volcanic eruption, offer a stunningly detailed portrait of their maritime culture. The famous flotilla fresco depicts a whole fleet of ships, their elegant lines cutting through the waves. We can see the high, curved stern and prow, the single massive mast supporting a broad sail, the cabins for dignitaries amidships, and the long banks of oarsmen powering the vessel when the wind was calm. These are not crude rafts, they are sophisticated, purpose-built ships, each one a floating testament to the adze-wielding shipwright's art. Similarly, intricate gold foil and clay models found in tombs and sanctuaries show us the precise details of their construction, the raised decks, the rigging, and the sleek profiles that made these vessels both graceful and powerful. This mastery of the sea allowed the Minoans to weave a web of influence that stretched across the ancient world. Their ships, laden with exquisite goods, became the lifelines of an international economy. From Crete, they exported their magnificent pottery, their finely crafted weapons, and perhaps most importantly, the precious saffron and olive oil that were their agricultural specialties. In return, their ships returned to the great palace ports like Knossos and Phaistos, overflowing with wealth, gold and ivory from Egypt, tin from Anatolia, or even further afield to alloy with copper for bronze, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and exotic goods from the Levant. This constant flow of goods and ideas didn't just make the Minoans rich, it made them the central hub of Bronze Age culture, influencing art, religion, and technology from Greece to the Nile Delta. The adze, therefore, was not just a tool for building boats, it was the key that unlocked a vast, interconnected world, creating a golden age of exchange and prosperity. This incredible achievement forces a profound question that has puzzled historians for generations. Without formal blueprints, detailed written plans, or modern engineering software, how did these ancient architects design and build such complex and reliable vessels? The answer lies in a living tradition of knowledge, passed orally from master to apprentice over centuries. The design of a Minoan ship was a set of ratios and rules of thumb, a mental template honed by endless repetition and real-world testing. A master shipwright knew that the keel must be a certain proportion of the overall length, that the curve of the hull must rise at a specific angle, and that the placement of the mast must be precisely calculated for balance. This knowledge was embodied, stored in the muscles and the mind, and expressed through the confident swing of the adze. Their tools were their blueprints, their experience was their calculator, and the relentless testing ground of the Mediterranean Sea was their quality control. The legacy of the Minoan shipbuilder is a humbling reminder that human ingenuity, when combined with deep observation and practiced skill, can achieve wonders that rival the output of our most advanced technology, connecting worlds with little more than a curved blade and a profound understanding of the wood and the water. What a breathtaking journey we have just taken together, through 24 windows into the ancient world. From the surgical precision of the Roman chirurgus to the sacred calculations of the Inca Quipu, each tool has spoken, telling a story not of primitive struggle, but of profound sophistication and deeply specialized knowledge. These were not mere jobs, they were callings that required a lifetime of dedication, a mastery of materials, and an intuitive understanding of science and art that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate through the patient work of archaeology. If these forgotten professions teach us anything, it is that human ingenuity is not a linear progression towards a modern pinnacle, but a brilliant, multifaceted spark that has flashed again and again across cultures and millennia, often burning brightly before being tragically extinguished by conquest, disaster, or simply the passage of time. Several powerful themes emerge from this collective portrait of ancient work, themes that feel strikingly relevant to our world today. The first is a lesson in sustainable innovation. Consider the Mesopotamian brewster turning human waste into a valuable cleaning agent, or the Minoan shipbuilder using flexible lashings instead of rigid nails to create a hull that could dance with the waves rather than fight them. These were not solutions born from a disposable culture, but from a deep intimacy with local materials and a constraint-driven creativity. They solved problems with what they had, and in doing so, they often arrived at elegant, resilient solutions that modern engineers are now rediscovering under the banner of biomimicry and circular design. Their ingenuity was not about overcoming nature, but about working with its grain, a philosophy we are urgently trying to reclaim. Furthermore, this tapestry of tools reveals an ancient world that was astonishingly interconnected, a vibrant network of cultural exchange long before the term globalization was ever coined. The Egyptian perfumer's flask held scents from the fabled land of Punt. The Roman glassblower's pipe transformed a Levantine invention into a mass-produced commodity that flooded the empire. The Chinese silk weaver's loom produced a fabric so coveted it became the namesake of a vast network of trade routes that moved not just goods, but ideas, religions, and technologies across continents. These professionals were nodes in a global network, proving that the human drive to connect, trade, and share knowledge is a fundamental force of history. Their work reminds us that no culture ever developed in a true vacuum. Innovation has always been a collaborative, cross-pollinating process. Perhaps the most humbling realization is how much specialized knowledge has been lost, often in a single, catastrophic moment. The Spanish melting down of Aztec goldsmithing masterpieces into bland ingots is a heart-wrenching metaphor for this loss. We can only wonder at the full depth of the Druids' botanical wisdom, the complete narrative power of the Mayan codices, or the intricate melodies played on the Greek aulos. This loss is a stark warning about the fragility of knowledge itself. It challenges our modern assumption that information, once digitized, is safe forever. These ancient professions show us that expertise is a living tradition, passed from master to apprentice, and when that chain is broken, the light goes out, sometimes for centuries. Yet, there is also a profound message of hope and resilience in these artifacts. The Roman aqueduct still stands. The Mesopotamian cuneiform tablet is still legible. The Inca Quipu, though its full language is lost, still speaks of a different way of seeing the world. These objects are a testament to the enduring human desire to create, to solve, to beautify, and to leave a mark. As the historian Will Durant famously reflected, civilization is a stream with banks. The stream is sometimes filled with blood from people killing, stealing, shouting. While on the banks, people are building homes, making love, raising children, painting, writing, and creating music. These 24 tools are all artifacts from the banks. They represent the builders, the creators, the healers, and the artists, the true engines of human progress. So what can we, in our age of rapid technological change, learn from these lost professions? We can learn the value of deep, tactile skill in a world that often prioritizes the virtual over the physical. We can learn the importance of preserving not just data, but the living, breathing traditions of craftsmanship. We can be inspired by their ability to achieve so much with so little, and perhaps apply that spirit of resourcefulness to the great challenges of our time. Most of all, we can learn to look at the everyday objects around us with new curiosity. The next time you hold a simple tool, a piece of pottery, or even a glass bottle, remember the long chain of human ingenuity it represents. For in the words of archaeologist Brian Fagan, the past is silent, it is we who give it a voice. These 24 discarded tools have found theirs, and they urge us to remember that every profession, no matter how humble, has the power to shape history and reveal the incredible, enduring creativity of the human spirit. And so our journey ends, having traveled through millennia and across continents, from the forges of Viking smiths to the sacred scriptoria of medieval monks. We have held 24 forgotten tools in our minds, each one a key that unlocked the door to a world of lost professions, revealing a depth of human ingenuity that continues to astonish. These artifacts are so much more than historical curiosities gathering dust in museum cases. They are profound, tangible lessons in innovation, artistry, and breathtaking adaptability. They show us that progress has never been a straight line dependent on complex technology, but a brilliant, scattered constellation of human creativity, flashing into existence wherever there was a problem to be solved or a beauty to be created. The Roman surgeon's scalpel speaks of a courage to intervene and heal. The Inca Quipu knotted cords whisper of a different way to see and record the world, and the Minoan shipbuilders adds echoes with the ambition to master the sea itself. Each tool in its own unique language tells the same powerful story, that human ingenuity, when paired with focused skill, can achieve wonders with even the simplest of instruments. This exploration leaves us with a humbling and transformative perspective. It challenges us to look at the everyday objects that surround us with entirely new eyes. The phone in your pocket, the ceramic mug on your desk, the woven fabric of your shirt, each is the endpoint of a long chain of professions, of specialized knowledge passed down and refined over generations. Just as we look back and marvel at the Celtic Druid's sickle or the Aztec goldsmith's crucible, we must now ask ourselves, what are the professions of our own time that future generations will struggle to comprehend? Will the concept of a software engineer or a social media manager seem as mysterious and arcane as the role of a Mesopotamian brewster or a Roman fullo? This reflection isn't meant to diminish our modern world, but to deepen our appreciation for the countless acts of unseen expertise that build and maintain our civilization, and to acknowledge that much of what we take for granted may one day be a fascinating mystery for archaeologists of the future to unravel. As the archaeologist Brian Fagan once so eloquently noted, every tool tells a story of hands that shaped history. These hands, calloused from gripping a hammer, stained from grinding pigments, steady from guiding a scalpel, are the true protagonists of our past. They remind us that history is not just a record of kings and battles, but a living tapestry woven from the daily toil and transcendent creativity of countless unnamed individuals. Their legacy is all around us, in the roads we travel, the words we read, and the very materials that shelter and clothe us. We are the beneficiaries of their forgotten skills, living in a world they helped to build. So the next time you hold any tool, from a simple kitchen whisk to a complex device, take a moment to appreciate the long lineage of innovation it represents. Let it connect you to that endless human drive to create, to improve, and to leave a mark. We would love to hear which of these 24 lost professions resonated most with you. Was it the mathematical brilliance of the Quipu maker, the sacred artistry of the Illuminator, or the maritime genius of the shipbuilder? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this excavation of history's mysteries, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the forgotten corners of our past. Thank you for watching, and